And so the prince hears this song, he hears this singing. That's his official name, the prince. He has
Yeah.
some fandom popular names like Ferdinand or Florian.
The is his first name, Prince is his
I was
last
just
name.
say the is his name.
Yeah, the hears the singing. He hops
The
in. Hey, Fantasy. Welcome back to Not My Fantasy, the show about fantasy films and the lore that inspired them. I'm Cullen,
And I'm Hannah.
and I'm here at the Seven Dwarfs Cottage with my heat uh,
Nice.
connected poison apple mug, drinking coffee at 5:16 p.m. for this bit.
Nice. I hope you not sleeping tonight is worth it.
Yeah, and I brought my Disney anniversary most impractical cup I own. I did.
So, spoilers for the end of the episode. Clearly, this is Cullen's fantasy.
And sweater reveal. I've been waiting to wear this sweater for this episode. It's not precisely Snow White, but I feel like it has the same energy. It keeps blending in.
Vibes. That's how good it is. It just
Yeah.
blends right in with the movie.
Yeah, it has like a man playing an accordion with a deer head playing there like in a garden and he's singing to a girl who's reading, a woman reading. Yeah, very
That
cottagecore.
is that is such an interesting sweater. I love it.
Yeah, Rafa got it for me for Christmas.
It's an amazing find. Oh my gosh.
And today with us is acclaimed author, podcaster, friend of the pod, Bethany.
acclaimed. I love it. Thank you so much.
Acclaimed here
I
on this
am
very
quickly
podcast.
I am quickly going to change my background because I want to jump on this bandwagon and be
Yes.
a part of the Seven Dwarves cottage. I'm finding it on my computer right now.
Yeah, Hannah is, of course, reporting from the Queen's Castle.
Of course, right from her
hmm
throne room.
Yeah, you love a witch
I love a witch. I was gonna do Kathy Najimy, right? She plays the evil queen in
in Descendants.
Descendants.
Yes.
But I also was like, I
Oh,
don't want more of that on my computer. So I just, my search history is cursed enough with, Twilight New Moon and
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm an author, so my search history should never be looked at.
It's yeah, probably crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I once did an interview where they were like, "What's the most obscure thing you ever researched?" And I'm like, "That's a rabbit hole. I don't know.
Yeah.
Everything."
I also have some books with me. I got Maria Tatar's The Fairest of Them All, Snow White and 21 Tales of Mothers and Daughters.
Mm.
So I've been reading Snow White variants from all over the world. And this is, I guess, yeah, we're talking about Snow White. You know it, you clicked on the episode. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, 1937. And we're mainly going to talk about the movie and the Brothers Grimm story. But as this is the start of something new, as I say in High School Musical, this is the start of our Women's History Month Snow White exploration leading up to the new live action. So we will be revisiting Snow White movies and exploring some different plot elements and Snow White variants from around the world. So,
Yeah.
but we got to start with the OG, the one that started it all. Um,
Yeah.
and I also have my one of my brother's Grimm books. Yeah, there.
Ooh,
I love
yours
how
is
loved that book is.
yeah.
I got it at a used bookstore because my other one was also too loved. Because it was like this paperback that I got as a kid that my mom was like, you need to read the real things. And like she got me this paperback and I definitely was not for children. And I was just like reading it in the like at my siblings' like hockey games and dance practices, just like
Oh,
yeah. And before I could
That,
remember my social security number, I would hide it in a post-it in that book under a certain story, and I would go look for it.
that's
Yeah.
so
not,
cute.
I mean, that's cute, but I'm also really scared for your financial security and
Yeah.
identity.
Yeah. Anyone who's breaking, and if you broke into my house and looked in that book,
You got it. It's all
you got
yours.
it. If you knew which story to look at too.
I'm like trying to guess if it would be what story in my mind, trying to figure out if it would be a story that's like financially resonant or something with like an identity crisis, but it's a
Oh,
rabbit
Mm.
that would
hole.
have been more thoughtful than I was at 18. Um, yeah, so we're talking about 1937, Walt Disney, Snow White, the first cell animated feature. It is not the
hmm
first animated feature to exist. It's just the first one most people watched. And we usually talk about if we've seen this one. I feel like most people have. I feel like this is one of those movies I always just like know seeing. Like, and then we had books, and my dad would like, he would read it, but he'd purposely read it wrong. He'd be like, Once upon a time, there was an ugly girl named Slush Gray. Uh, and then we'd be like, No, that's not how it goes. And I do remember I used to have a tape recorder, and I definitely did an audio retelling of this one with my own original songs. Uh,
Nice.
I'm gonna need a copy of that
Yeah,
immediately.
send it
yeah,
now.
Immediately.
I don't know where it is.
Okay, I will email mom.
Yeah, give me your mom's email. Uh, and then I would play. I remember my little cousin Stella loved this one. And then I remember playing Snow White, but it was always in peril. Like, I'd always be running through the trees, like,
Mm.
or I'd be the dwarves going to chase the witch. But it was never like we're having a peaceful time. It was always like chaos. Um, Hannah, what's your experience with Snow White?
I know I've definitely seen this movie, but I probably haven't seen it since I was a little kid. But yeah, this is one of those that like I know I've seen this movie. It's sort of like Cinderella. Like I'm like, I know I saw this movie before. But yeah, this wasn't in my roster. Famously, listeners would know that
It's Mulan,
it's
Little
not
Mermaid, Aladdin.
exactly if it's not those, there's a good chance I didn't see it. But, Snow White, I think we probably had like a VHS of this probably. Um,
We
so
did,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, definitely seen it. Yeah, and it was nice to revisit because I don't like I vaguely remember the story. The only thing really that I remember is her being at the cottage with the dwarves. And so seeing everything else connected together as an adult, I was like, "Oh, this is actually a nice little story." So,
So I should have brought more of my stuff with me. Prior to the release of Tangled, Snow White was my ultimate favorite. I
mm,
actually have the tattoo
very
of the
cool.
man in the mirror. There's an old Romanian version, because I'm Romanian. There's an old Romanian version of this story where the man in the mirror, Vikram, was actually the queen's first love and he got trapped in the mirror. It was later used on a TV show that have not gotten around to watching, but I will. Once upon a
Once
time,
upon a
something like
time,
that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, a
So yeah, I
classic
actually
mess.
have a tattoo. I have a necklace. I have probably six different versions of the Brothers Grimm, including the one I showed you guys a copy of this beautiful. You can't see it because that's how a virtual background works. But I'll send a
Send a
picture.
picture, we'll
Um,
post. Yeah.
but yeah, I've always had a thing for fairy tales, and so I think just as like an overall easy present for me, people will grab me like, here's a collector's edition, or here's this like art print version. So I think I probably have six or seven copies. My most loved copy is 70 years old
Wow.
because it was my grandmother's. And it's
Oh,
actually in a really tight sealed bag in my hope chest where it can no
Mm-hmm.
longer be damaged by time. And environment and
Yeah.
exposure and stuff, but it's very, very loved. It is being held together by like just prayer and hope at this point, and that's why it's in a really tightly sealed bag. We're
Held
trying to
together
make
with a
sure it's
smile and a song.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean this one is obviously a classic in cinema
Hmm.
history, in fairy tale history. And Cassie of Slippers and Spindles famously always said that she feels like this movie is why Snow White is a top tier fairy tale for modern
Hmm.
audiences. That it would have been a more obscure deep cut if not for this movie.
Hmm.
Um, and there was a live action movie that Walt saw, a silent film that inspired him, like he saw it as a kid, and that like left him with this story. So it's not like it was a total like bottom tier Brothers Grimm. Um,
Hmm.
but it is a unique one. But we'll get to the history of the story. But this film was directed by Wilfred Jackson, Hamilton Lusk, and Clyde Geronimi. It stars Adriana Casaletti as Snow White. She was 18 at the time. She was cast, and she was pretty underpaid, and she had to sign a contract that said she could no longer perform in anything else. And she didn't realize what she was signing. Um, so my old therapist had a poster that was signed by her, but she would like sign backwards as like a screw you to Disney. But she like came back and recorded for a couple different things. But she at one point she I think all three Disney princesses sued for royalties from their
Hmm.
VHS releases, and they did not get anything. And she wanted money from the record, and they said, "Nope, you signed over your voice." She wasn't even invited to the premiere. She showed up
Hmm.
with the guy who played the prince, and they're like, "Oh, can we come in and could we get a ticket?" And they're like, "Oh no." And so they had to sneak in. So they snuck in and watched it, which is very cute, but like,
Not really. Like it's
yeah.
That's
cute, but it's like also they shouldn't have had to do that.
Yeah, it's like
yeah.
those cute stories your
Yeah.
grandparents tell you that you're like, ah, and then you're like, but the
If I
context
think
around
about that
that.
too, if I think about that too long, it's not nearly as romantic as it sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, Lucille Laverne was the queen. Roy Atwell as Doc. Pinto Colvig as Grumpy and Sleepy. Otis Harlan as Happy. Scotty Matra as Bashful. Billy Gilbert as Sneezy. Eddie Collins as Dopey. Harry Stockwell as the Prince. Maroney Olson as the Magic Mirror. And Stuart Buchanan as the Huntsman. Um, with supervising director David Hand and sequence directors Pierce, William Cottrell, Larry Moray, Wilfred Jackson, and Ben Sharpstein. A bunch of people worked on the story. We got Ted Sears, Richard Greedon, Otto Englander, Dick Rickard, Earl Hurd, Meryl Damaris, Dorothy Ann Blank, and Webb Smith, produced by Walt Disney. It was a huge artistic and technical achievement. It made gobs of money, was one of the highest grossing animated features for decades. Um, I used a multi-plane camera effect, uh, which gives that storybook feeling of depth. Has music by Frank Churchill, Lee Harline, and Paul Smith. And I actually, went to Disney Reel to Reel, a podcast. I asked them for some help with a research question. There are a lot of alternate lyrics used in, especially for Snow White songs, in like theme parks, in different stage productions. And I was like, what's going on here? And he was like, in the olden days, they would just release pop single versions with their own lyrics.
Hmm.
Because I was like, is it because they didn't have their own like Disney owned record company until
Hmm.
Cinderella? So, and he's like, no, they even did that in the 50s. It's just like, that's just what was done. And so you'll see a lot of different versions, and I guess we'll talk about it when we get to the song. There's like a lot of cover versions of Someday My Prince Will Come, or versions in the parks will have very different lyrics that kind of change the whole meaning of the song and kind of add to the pop culture conception of the song, which seems to exist in its own context from the context used in the movie.
I want to share one of my tidbits. Um, this film included over 250,000 drawings, but 2 million sketches were made in the production.
Oh my
And
gosh.
over 750 artists completed and worked on these sketches and drawings to create this film.
My gosh. That's
Art.
incredible.
And people did call it Disney's Folly at the time because they're
Yeah,
like,
I
no
thought that
one,
was really funny. They were like, this is gonna flop, y'all.
yeah, they're like, no one's gonna sit and watch a cartoon for that long because cartoons were
hmm
only shorts. Like, how is it gonna make any sense? Like, this is gonna be a waste of money because Disney mortgaged his own house. But it was a huge hit. People were crying. That is one thing I would love, like if you could go back in time. Like I would love to like see this with no context. Like now it's like so
Mm.
ingrained in us, like we know it from children. Like imagine like just seeing it. Uh I love that.
Well, one thing I thought was interesting is that it actually, the target audience was not children,
Hmm.
the way
Yeah.
that we would assume it is now. And I know that because my great grandmother told me that when she saw it when she was a little girl, she mentioned like that her mom didn't want her to see it because it was an adult film and she
Hmm.
was like 16 at the time, 15 at the time. But I thought it was interesting. So that was one of the things I researched before we recorded. And actually, in England, it was deemed too scary, and you needed to be accompanied by a parent if you were under the age of 16 to watch this film,
Yeah.
which to me is like, man, if they could walk into Disney Channel, even just like a Disney Channel show right now,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's like the perspective is so strangely different. Like
Yeah.
we've had such huge cultural shifts in the last 90 years that it makes such a big
Hmm.
difference.
Yeah. This movie is both more horrifying than a lot of modern things and way more tame.
Yeah.
Hmm
Uh Yeah, there were some cut scenes. Like, there was a whole soup musical number that was cut. There was a scene where they were building a bed. The prince's whole plot line, because they couldn't animate a man convincingly. They're like, "Ooh, we'll save that for later," and that later was Sleeping Beauty.
Oh man, that's funny.
Because that's the why that prince is our first interactive prince, really, because they could do it. Um, this movie opened December 21st, 1937, 68 years before Chicken Little. Uh,
Why is that the reference?
it's a reference that we have to
I was to
everything.
say, I would love to tell people where that started, how it started. I don't even
You
remember
don't
it.
you
And I love,
do you want me to say or do you just
No,
no,
I want
I
to
would
know.
love, oh,
Do I
okay.
get
Well,
to
I'll plug
know?
my
okay.
ears.
So
No, go ahead.
in our Black Cauldron episode, we talked about the Cinderella Castle Mystery Tour in Tokyo, which was like a villain's attraction with the Horned King, and it was open until 2006. And I was like, so you could
Oh,
go
that's
on this Black Cauldron ride in a post Chicken Little world. And then that was like episode 2, and ever since then, we'll just pepper in like where things are in relation to Chicken Little.
So wait, when did Chicken Little come out? Because I want to
2005.
build my whole life. 2005.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
So
when
in
everything
my mind,
changed.
2005 was when I said goodbye to Friends and I said hello to How I Met Your Mother.
And
There
that's
you
So,
all
go.
because of Chicken Little.
and it's all
Yep.
because of Chicken Little. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm glad that I finally had that missing piece in my life.
yeah,
Yeah.
that puzzle. Yeah, that puzzle
Yeah,
piece.
it's been a long time. It's been 20 years I've been trying to figure out what was missing. So,
Hmm.
You're
There
thank
you
you
welcome.
for
go.
that.
The movie came out also only 74 years after the death of the Grimm brothers.
Which is crazy, right?
That
It
is
feels
weird to
like there's a
think.
much bigger time span in between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, and 9 years before the word homosexual appeared in the Bible. So
That's
Interesting.
in
interesting.
order to have that context, you'd be in a post-dopey world. In order to see that word in the Bible, you would mostly
You would
be
be in a
aware of who Dopey
post-dopey
was.
world. Well, you'd
Yeah.
have to be so I could call you dopey.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it was critical and commercial success. More international earnings of more than 8 million, released during the Great Depression.
which
Uh,
is astronomical.
Hmm.
Astronom People were living in Hoover villages while this movie was making millions of dollars.
Hmm.
Nine of the most predominant first world nations in the world were going through a massive depression while this movie was making millions of dollars what is the ratio now? Like, what's the inflation rate
I've
or
definitely
something like
seen
that?
that.
That's got to be
Okay.
like a huge number.
Worldwide, its inflation adjusting earnings, it topped the animation list. But I don't think I have the number, but it's
Well,
incredibly high.
it's got to
Hmm.
be.
It rivals, like, it was up there with like Lion King and Frozen.
Right.
Um, and so it was like Disney's top performer for years. It was the highest grossing animated film for 55 years.
Oh, goodness.
Highest grossing film in 1938. Its initial budget was 1.5 million. It was re-released theatrically until its home video release in the 90s. It was nominated for Best Film Score and then got an honorary award the next year. Unfortunately, as they always show up, the Nazis liked it. Um, And that's a time to point out that Disney popularized the translation of her skin being white as snow.
Hmm.
That is not 100% accurate translation. It's not like a crazy translation to make or a crazy
Hmm.
interpretation to make, but they popularized that translation, and we'll get into the different ways you could translate it. Um, do I think they did that for the Nazis? No. Like it's just like it's the most common, it's a common sense translation. But yeah, they liked it. But you know who didn't like it? J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, who I usually would side with over, I mean anyone over the Nazis, but especially them. Uh, they thought it was a vulgar film made by an uneducated American boob, and
Love that.
he turned something mythical into something cheap. Tolkien, he was like, I liked her. And C.S. Lewis was like, I liked the animals, but they did not like the dwarves.
Hmm.
So
And
my
that,
only thing for that would be there's an expression by Einstein that everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, we will all believe we are ignorant.
wow.
J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, not in the same bank as Snow White or Disney,
Yeah.
nor do I think Disney and Snow White were trying to achieve the level of fantasy, high fantasy that J.R.R. Tolkien is literally the father of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or that C.S. Lewis, especially in his enrapturement for wonder and mystery and just an overall conversion of the human experience through literature. Those are nowhere. You're comparing a lobster to bologna. Like
Yeah.
they each have their place in the sun, but they are not on the same menu.
No. But The Hobbit
But if
only
they were, could you imagine? Oh
bologna
my
and lobster.
God. Guy
Uh,
Fieri would love that restaurant.
I need to go to, there's like a haunted Snow White diner in Hollywood that's like, they used the art and Disney was gonna sue them, then was like, you know what, who cares? It's like this old landmark.
I love
Um,
it.
Disney said, so what? Who cares? Wow.
yeah, so I need to check it out. I mean, it looks like a diner that like you're gonna eat it and you're gonna poop it out right away, like that kind of food.
Got it.
But I want to try it.
If
I'll
we,
time how long it takes. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, they actually only The Hobbit only came out a few months before this movie. So
Hmm.
that's and to be when I read The Hobbit as a kid, I imagined the dwarves as these dwarves because they're kind of
when
iconic dwarves.
when I read The Hobbit as a kid, I thought I was stupid because there was too much going on, and my tiny little brain was like, I don't understand this. And my mom was like, seriously, what don't you understand? And then she opened the
Gaslighting.
egg and everything that came out was just like, this is even more confusing. And then I remember in junior high in my AP English class, we had to do Lord of the Rings. And I remember telling my professor, like the first 2 weeks, I was like, okay, The Hobbit was really hard when I read it. And she's like, well, how old were you when you read it? And I was like, 7. And she's like, okay, chill out. Like, you're 14 now.
Yeah.
You have a much different worldview and understanding of like academic vocabulary and literature. And yeah, but I do remember trying to get through The Hobbit as a child and just being completely overwhelmed.
Yeah. I love in the movies when they're like the hot dwarves, and I'm like, I imagined you as bashful when I read this. Uh, we'll get to those movies someday.
Someday.
This is a controversial, beloved film. I feel like everyone has an opinion on this one, whether or not they've even seen it recently. Snow White is an official Disney princess. She was one of the OGs. She is. Are you ready for it? It's been a while since we've got a patron princess list.
Yeah, it's been a while. Let's
She's a
go.
she's a patron princess of animal lovers, baking, nostalgic girlies, sweet tooths, trauma survivors, drama queens, defying the haters, keeping your peace, actively learning people's names, kindness, bossiness, cleaning, positivity, red lipstick, bobs, kitten heels, surviving your death experiences, goth, emos, Halloween lovers, people who still listen to the radio, baby voices, animation, and film nerds, and people who love to Disney bound.
People who still listen to the radio. I love it. I
Yeah,
like that you
Yeah.
had to pause not once, but twice during that list to take a breath. That is
yeah.
Yeah.
a much longer list than I would have anticipated.
Yeah,
Oh,
well,
yeah.
I think we need to advocate because there's been discussion that people's favorite Disney princess says something about them politically, and I'm like, I think it's a lot more niche than that because
Hmm.
I think you get people on both sides of the aisle standing some of these girls. So like, I'm trying to get specific.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, and I
She's
also
pretty and I like her singing. Like I'm very surface level on some of these Disney things, you know. I think that it's really I think it's slightly unfair to judge a film from 1937 through the experience and the cultural vision of someone in 2025, not to erase or ignore any of the problems that are problematic in this film, but just to acknowledge that we are in two completely different societies. For
Yeah.
example, we all know Nazis equals bad. 1937, Disney was like buddy buddy. So just and that's from like a Jew. I just want to keep that in mind. Like that's from the perspective of a Jew, is it's just like there's such a huge cross of time between it's literally almost 100 years between the production of that film and where our current society is. And it's so strange to me to compare the two things when they're really in completely different worlds.
Hmm.
yeah, I think it is. I think it's like not like the film is above criticism, but I think it is
Yeah.
kind of an unfair thing. Like there were different expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, after Twilight New Moon, this felt like a feminist manifesto to me.
I
Actively
love
learning
it.
people's names was definitely inspired by
Yeah.
Twilight. She is, Snow White is a lot more capable of forming relationships, functioning, remembering names, and all, without a man. And I don't
Yeah.
think Bella has that not intentionality, internal life, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that was much more recent.
One of the things I noticed when I was doing my research, and I'm curious about your opinion of it, is one of the main complaints was that it was anti-feminine for her to be responsible for the cooking and the cleaning and the baking. I Here's my thing. I kind of get what they're saying, but again, 1937, women weren't supposed to be doing a lot else. And two, her statement is literally like, "Hey, I'm living here for free. So since you guys are housing and feeding me, here's how I'm going to contribute." And I feel like girl or boy doesn't matter at that point. They're feeding her, they're giving her a home. She's like, "Well, I don't have like a job or anything, so this is how I'm going to contribute to our household." Like to me, that wasn't necessarily a feminist thing, but I'm very curious what you guys think.
I think that it's sort of like manners in a way that
Yeah.
like that's how I consider that. It's like, well, I don't have any other way to like repay you for this
Mm-hmm.
kindness, so I'm at least gonna like help do the dishes. Like you try to be helpful in the ways that you can be.
Like a
Yeah.
It's
common courtesy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think also there's some of that criticism came from the place of like that's where like almost all media or like almost all representations of women that were being
Mm-hmm.
provided were as homemakers. And so this like supports that. But now if you're looking at her as part of like we talked about the princess lineup, and yes, it's Snow White and Cinderella, but it's also like Moana and like Mulan. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, now if you're showing like a broad spectrum of female protagonists, kids can be like, oh, well, I like Snow White and I like that she bakes, or I like Moana and that she goes on adventures, right? Like, so you're given a fuller
Right.
spectrum of what you can be. And so I think, well, especially a lot of this criticism was coming out in the 70s, right? Like, and I think was very valid. And I think to like stick, like, you need to progress the conversation. And I think people
Mm-hmm.
now it's like, well, she's part of kind of a pantheon of characters that have very different lives. And you can appreciate this life in this very simple story and her
Right.
sense of survival. And you can appreciate like what Raya does in The Last Dragon. You can appreciate
Yeah.
like Anna and Elsa. Like you can like you have this whole variety, which is I think what people were asking for initially. Less of we can't have this and more of like more options.
Yeah. I would say like too is I think we're finally coming around to it's okay to do both. It's okay if you want to stay at home and cook and clean and do all of that stuff. I would love to personally. If I could quit my day job and my life was just like writing books and podcasting and like making dinner, like done. Sign me up right now. And I
Yeah.
can't, my husband is shaking his head because that's his dream is
Yeah.
that he gets to stop working and he can be my house husband and he can cook and clean and chill out at home all day. Like, I feel like there, for a long time, there was a lot of negativity because there was such a high demand for female role models that went outside the home that we sort of
Mhm.
started to condemn any role models that were within the home. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that there's strength in both and that being a feminist means that you want equality and that you want that representation. If you want to stay home and cook and bake and take care of your family, get it. If you want to go out and have a really successful career and uh, have like your own identity outside of the home, get it. Like those are equal to me. Whatever it is that
Mhm.
you want to do, that is okay to be a representation for a positive female role model because I don't want to be told my whole life, like, you cannot stay home and cook and clean if you, even if you want to, because that makes you a bad feminist. But it seems like a lot of fun. Like, I would just listen to audiobooks and like make smothered pork chops or something. I don't know. Like, I would
Yeah, I
finally have
guess.
time to do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I mean it's just about I guess having the legal rights and the legal recourse to
Yeah,
do what
Mhm.
you want to do and not taking that away from other people because the reality is
right.
women have always worked and often had careers and like the concept of a housewife is a relatively recent and short-lived historical phenomenon.
I
So
just
it's
don't
just
like that it has a negative connotation to it. It's like, oh, you're a
uh,
stay-at-home mom or you're a housewife. Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
why is that a bad thing? Like, good for you
Yeah.
that your family can afford that.
Yeah. I mean, that's also like be a single income.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my favorite are the people who complain about women, like a Candace Owens type who complains about women working while doing from the platform
Well,
of their
well,
job. And I'm like,
from
well,
the
what are you
platform of
doing to say that?
her very like demanding job that, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Or
mean,
like
she came
trad
for
wives who are
Taylor
like
Swift, so that's
influencers.
unforgivable in my eyes, but
Yeah.
Well, it's not the only unforgivable thing she's done, I'm sure.
no, it's not. But that's like the tame way of me broaching that subject.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Snow White also has a big presence in the parks.
Mm-hmm.
In the Magic Kingdom, she has a Seven Dwarfs mine train. In Shanghai, she has a castle walkthrough and the mine train, two
Ooh.
rides. Uh, in Paris and Tokyo, she has Snow White's Scary Adventures. And she used to have that in Florida and Disneyland, but Disneyland rebranded recently to Snow White's Enchanted Wish, which is actually my favorite ride at Disneyland. It's gives you a very storybook feeling.
Did you just invite me to come and see you so I can go on this ride?
Yeah,
Because
let's go
I've
to
never
Disneyland.
even heard of it. I
Let's
am
do
going
it.
on a book tour soon. Maybe I should add LA to my
Yeah,
to my list
add
so I can go.
Anaheim.
I have never been to Disneyland or Disney World.
Oh my
So,
goodness. Well, I mean, use the book tour as an excuse. Okay.
I
Go to
mean, I
Anaheim,
might.
go to Orlando. There you go.
Yeah.
We've been to the both Harry Potter worlds,
Oh, okay, so
Okay.
but
you went to the other
this
parks in
yeah, I
Orlando.
went to
Yeah.
the other parks, yeah. And when I was a kid, I got the option to go to Disney or Knott's Berry Farm, and I chose Knott's Berry Farm. So that's on
Foolish.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. As
because
someone who
Knott's Berry
used
Farm was great.
I mean, I do like Disneyland of I've been to the Paris Disneyland and the Disneyland here and then Magic Kingdom. And I think Disneyland here is my favorite overall. There were things I liked about each one, but I think I like the retro feeling of this
Okay.
Disneyland.
I'm gonna tell you right now, the husband is not gonna come with me. I can tell you right now, the eyes would roll so fast. So you may have to go with me just so I'm not all by
Yeah.
myself.
Well,
Oh
maybe
no.
let me know when, because there's a SoCal resident pass I've been thinking of getting. That's like a pretty
Yes.
good deal. There, she also has a wishing well grotto there. Um,
Ooh,
yeah, and at one point they had a Broadway style like theme park show that was Snow White, and
maybe
there
they'll
was
bring
a
it back.
Radio City Snow White Broadway style show way before kind of the current Disney on Broadway. So it's kind of uncanny if you can see the whole thing on YouTube. Like the animal costumes are crimes, but it's interesting. Um, like many Disney characters, she made an appearance in my fanfic as an anti-slut shaming icon who inspired
Yes.
legal actions against sexual harassment, but was but boy crazy and into sweet treats and bubbly. And she knew her stepmom was a witch, and she helped solve mysteries. And so I'll use that because that was a high school story. I'm gonna use that as a jumping off point. I made her a junior because a lot of people are like Snow White was 14 years old, which they just kind of made up. That's not canonical. That's a BuzzFeed fact.
Yeah.
And then lately they've been saying she's 14 and the prince is 30. And they're like, someone just made that up and now everyone believes it. And it's like, well, that's no, like that's not what the
Yeah.
movie's trying to get you to read. And that wouldn't have been normal then. And it's not normal now.
Yeah.
I think if you're 30, you're probably too old to play the character at Disneyland. I don't think they let you do it. So,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Well,
also, by
also
30, you would have
there's
been married by then.
yeah.
Yeah.
You would have
Yeah.
been
There's
you
no
would have
way you're
been
a single
promised,
man at 30 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
yeah, like as a
Also,
prince, absolutely not.
I think it's worth mentioning that there's more than one version of Snow White or the concept of Snow White, even by the Brothers Grimm. And at no point, to my recollection, and I've read them several times, at no point does it specify her age.
Well, it does, but not at the end. And we'll get to the Brothers Grimm adaptation.
Okay.
I have a few more Snow White Disney fun facts, including that I've met her. She looks great for her age. She asked if I was a tall dwarf, and she said I was green as a gooseberry because I was wearing a green shirt. So she's just having a good time meeting people.
What's a gooseberry? Is that a
She,
real thing? I don't
yeah,
know.
gooseberry pie. That's what she's making.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And have you heard of Alan Turing, the father of
Yeah,
modern computer science,
of course.
who was prosecuted for homosexual acts and chemically castrated?
Yeah.
So this is
Mm.
a bit of a content warning, I guess, because his death is debated potentially a suicide. But he was obsessed with the witch's poison apple and the spell, and he often kind of like said that to his running buddy. And many people believe he died via cyanide poisoning that he placed in an apple.
Hmm.
Interesting.
So it's
I am very unaware of who that person is and what their legacy is. So I just
he
opened a
basically
Google tab so that when we're done, I can
Yes.
rabbit hole.
and
Okay, so
he
that's
helped the
my
Allies win World War II with his computer science
okay.
advancements, but because they found out he was gay, they just like ruined his life.
Okay.
Yeah. You should
Yeah.
watch the film The Imitation Game, I think is what it's called, right? With Benedict Cumberbatch.
Okay, on the
Um,
list.
it's very, very excellent. But yeah, it basically chronicles them creating the machine that broke the code of like was it Nazi messages to help them be able to
Oh, that guy.
Yeah.
yes.
I thought his name was something totally different. I know who that
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's jump into our lore. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so the book I got by Maria Tatar, famous folklorist, icon queen, stan her. She put this book a collection of different Snow White tales, but she calls them the beautiful girl tales
Oh.
because Snow White is like one version and white isn't really an element in most of them because they're from all over the world. The ATU type on Thompson Uther is Tales of Magic 709, Snow White, or as Maria Tatar prefers, The Beautiful Child. Right in between 708, The Wonder Girl, and 710, Our Lady's Child, which is a fun Unhinged Brothers Grimm one where the Virgin Mary adopts a kid. Um, so
Okay.
the white skin that we hinted at is not integral to the plot, and some like Maria Tatar, uh, I'm not going to be Wikipedia where they say like some people say, and then they put the question mark and are like who. Maria Tatar put this forward that the name could mean like the snow, loving the snow, white as snow of the snow. So it's not skin specific. So saying, oh, her skin white as snow is like a logical way to translate, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. And there is a Viking story about someone with a similar name, a woman who is like beloved by this chief, and he doesn't want to bury her, and he's like watching her tomb, and then they flip her over, and they're like, well, her back's decayed, she is dead, and so then that helps him move on.
Hmm.
Um, so as we delve more into the history of the tale, so we'll talk about different elements of the Brothers Grimm version and other tale types as we do our Snow White series. But we're going to talk about the Brothers Grimm, which is the most dominant one, which especially became amplified by Disney adapting it. And Disney tends to erase all other cultural conceptions of a story all over the world by the capitalist machine that is Disney. So that's a thing. But I sound so millennial. I said that's a thing.
But you know, but you're right. Disney has sort of shadowed what most people's interpretations of any fairy tale adaptation is, which is why so many elements of fairy tales are associated with Disney instead of the original content or the original idea behind it. I think that that's a really good point to bring up is that there's a lot to be said for how much of our 2025 fairy tale adaptation is completely obscured by what we assume is just, oh, Disney got it right when Disney didn't get anything right.
Yeah, they just
There's very little that Disney did correctly.
yeah, it's just one that theirs is just one version that reflects like American values at that time.
Right.
And it's okay to go back and keep reinterpreting the
Yes,
story.
it
Um,
is.
there were multiple drafts of Snow White in the Brothers Grimm collection. And the first draft, the evil queen is Snow White's mother, but
Mm.
they considered motherhood too sacred. And something I learned from this book is that in many versions, the villain is the girl's mother, but it's hard to find any girl or mother on girl violence in China. It's usually a second wife or a stepmother in Chinese culture. So I guess the Brothers
Interesting.
Grimm didn't make that up. And in an early draft, they're in England randomly, even though it's a German story, and it's Schneewitten, but it's in England, and then it's her father, the king, who finds the coffin, and he has doctors pull on her limbs with ropes, which revives her, and then she'd marry some other prince. Uh, but they were combining a few different versions that people were sharing with them.
Hmm.
But the Rough Brothers Grimm story goes like this. There's a queen, she's embroidering, she pricks her finger and bleeds on the embroidery, and she's like, "Oh, if only I had a child as white as snow, red as blood, and black as ebony." Okay, go off, I guess. Um, she has the child, dies, king gets a new wife. Um, and she's vain, she can't stand anyone being prettier. She goes to her magic mirror each day, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all. And one day when Snow White is 7, it's like, Snow White is prettier, sorry.
Saw
Uh,
we.
sorry about that. And so she asked the huntsman to kill her and bring her her kidney and liver so she can eat them. And he takes pity on her for being lovely. Um, now
Not for
it's
being a
dark.
child.
Well, it's lovely is a wide
A wide
word.
Range
interpretation.
of,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay.
He's like, well, the animals are gonna eat her anyway, and he feels great relief, like a stone rolled from his heart. And I'm like, wow, what a great guy. He needs his own movie. And then he kills a boar, gives a kidney and liver to the queen, who then eats them. Uh,
Hmm.
she finds a cottage that is described like a doll's house, all cute and neat, and she pulls a Goldilocks. She breaks in, starts eating their food, taking a nap. She's hungry and thirsty. She was running through the woods, and it describes animals running around her like tigers and wolves and stuff. So she needed a break. So she ate a few vegetables, a little bread from each plate. From each mug, she drank some wine. And then she's tired, so she lays down on each bed, but none of them feels right until the seventh one. Um, and so she remained lying in it and trusted herself to God and fell asleep.
Which came first, Goldilocks or Snow White?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Because
Because that
Goldilocks.
is eerily similar.
Yeah, because the dwarves come in and they're like, who's been sitting in my chair? Who's been eating from
Right.
my plate? Who's eating my bread, my vegetables, my fork, my knife, my mug? Demi Lovato's favorite dish, a mug. And then they like are like, who stepped on my bed? And they're like, someone's lying in my bed. And then they're like, oh, here she is. And they're like, who are you? And she's like, I'm little Snow White. And they let her live with them if she keeps house. And
Okay, so if
whenever
anybody wants to know, according to according to librarything.com, which is a resource librarians like myself like to use, Snow White, the first published version, can be credited to the Brothers Grimm in 1812, and the first recorded version of Goldilocks and the Three Bears was written down by Robert Southey in 1837.
so Snow White came first.
So Snow White came first.
Interesting.
However, Goldilocks, because of its origin, is also considered a fairy tale in that the actual original author cannot be traced.
An oral folk tale.
So I don't know.
They probably couldn't came from the same source. There was
Right?
some
It could have
girl
been two.
somewhere break into people's homes.
Trying out people's beds and
Yeah.
silverware,
It makes
their
thievery look
cutlery.
like really innocent.
Yeah. Um, and so they find her, they let her stay with them, but they're like, be careful of your stepmother. Who goes to the mirror and finds out she's alive beyond the seven mountains. So
Hmm.
she does paints her face. She does a get ready with me to go kill my stepdaughter.
She's get ready with me.
She poses as a lace seller and then laces Snow White up so tight in her corset she falls down dead. And the dwarves unlace her and are like, "Don't let anyone in the cottage, please." And so the same shit happens again, but this time it's a comb. And someone's like, "I can't let you in," and she's like, "Just like lean your head out and I'll comb your hair."
Hmm.
And then she poisons her, and then the dwarves remove it. And the queen is getting mad. She trembles with anger and says, Snow White shall die if it costs me my life. So she went into her super secret room. She made a poisoned apple. From the outside, it was beautiful white with red cheeks, and anyone who saw it would want it, but anyone who might eat a little piece of it would die. So she dressed up as an old woman. Snow White peeks her head out. Is like, I can't take anyone or take anything. And she's like, oh, it's fine. I'll eat half the apple and you eat half the apple because only the red half was poisoned. So she eats the red half, dies, and the queen's envious heart was at rest as much as well as an envious heart can ever be at rest.
Hmm.
Drag her.
True, 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 true.
So she's Miss Keisha level dead, and the dwarves couldn't save
Keisha
her.
Appleton.
They say we cannot bury her in the Black Earth because there's a the Fairy Tellers has a great episode. I'll see if I can find it and link it below about like the history of red, black, and white because
Hmm.
in language there's some of the first colors that a language will develop and describe. And so
Hmm.
I thought that was
Because they're
interesting.
like primary colors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so they put her in this glass coffin and with her name written in gold to indicate her royal status. It says she's the daughter of a king. And so they put her on a mountain and rotate, taking guard. And animals mourn her as well. First an owl, then a raven, then a dove, which some have interpreted as symbols of Athena, Odin, and the Holy Spirit, like the three kind of main influences on European literature,
Hmm.
Greco-Roman mythology, Norse mythology, and Christianity. And she doesn't decay. And one day, a prince seeks shelter with the dwarves. It's like an Airbnb at this point.
Hmm.
Uh,
But he knocks on the door. He doesn't just like come in like,
yeah,
whose food
Yeah.
is this? I'm hungry.
he has a reservation. He is the
He
app.
has a reservation. He called
Uh,
ahead.
and he's like, who's in this coffin? I need her. And the dwarves are like, she's not for sale, weirdo. And he's like, I need to look upon her always or I'll die. Don't worry, I'll like honor her and take care of her. So they let him carry it off, but a servant slips and the coffin falls and the apple is dislodged from her throat. So she coughs it up and she wakes up like, where the fuck am I? And he's like, I'm a prince, marry me. And I read a couple translations, and in some it says she instantly loved him or was kind to him and went off to marry him. So I love the interpretation that she's like, I don't want to let him down. I'm a people
Just a
The
pleaser.
people
I'm
pleaser.
following I'm following along with you, and in my version it just says Snow White accepted. After all, she went with him, and their wedding was prepared with great finery and splendor. When her other choices in life brought her to her godless stepmother's home, she needed a separate place for celebration. So I guess like
That's a
stepmom bad, prince must be better.
that's
That's
an
the one
interesting
with the really pretty
translation.
cover. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the because I have like so many copies, but that's the one with the really pretty cover. So we'll take that with a grain of salt. That's
grain
not
of
a
salt.
very good translation if you ask me. Mr. Matthew P. Price and Noel Daniel, who translated these, I encourage you to do just a little bit more
Uh,
because
that's
that
coming
that
from a
doesn't
librarian.
necessarily.
Send it back with your red line notes.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is the librarian in me as I just really like
Yep.
accuracy. But I also like, I will give credit that it's not easy to translate a lot of different fairy
Sure.
tales. Because not only are you translating it from one language to another, you're translating it from a language that is no longer used.
Hmm.
Language evolves
Hmm.
astronomically,
Yep.
even just the pound sign is now a hashtag and 10 years ago it wasn't, so
Yeah.
language evolves astronomically, especially after over 200 years. So um yeah, definitely not the best translation, but I did want to point it out simply because it in both versions she accepts with literally no quorum.
Yeah.
She's just I I
Why
guess
not?
like
Yeah.
that's my option in life is I'll just this prince wants to marry me, so I'll marry him.
She just responds with her own cover of Hillier Duff's Why Not?
I love
Why
that
not
would
take
make
a
me so happy.
why not take a crazy chance?
You see I have Lizzie McGuire bangs, right? Like
Yeah.
you're speaking to me, Cullen.
It's and then it says her godless stepmother was invited.
Hmm.
She checked the invite list before leaving, and she was checking her fit, and then she talked to the mirror, and the mirror is like, Snow White's fairest in the land again, and she's the one
And
getting
she's
married.
still alive, like like over the hill or
And
over the mountains, I think, right? Over the mountains.
over the seven mountains, and the queen is pissed. But at first she's like, I won't go. I'm not going. Then she's like, I'm gonna know no peace until I see her. So she goes screaming,
It's that
crying, throwing
envious
up.
heart.
It's that envious heart. It
Hmm.
says she's like green and yellow with rage. And she looks upon Snow White and is frozen in fear and rage. And then it just says she was given red hot shoes and forced to dance herself to death.
Ah,
It does not say whose idea that was. Um, we're left to wonder, but that's the note we end on.
love that.
So that's the Brothers Grimm Snow White. And in a way, Disney is pretty faithful. I think it's a
Hmm.
simplified story. Um,
I think that especially in terms of like they meet and get married with no subtext. Like
Yeah.
at least in Disney, they have like the weird song at the beginning where
yeah,
he like can very easily get into her castle because he hears her singing. Even though we see
Yeah.
him outside a giant wall,
Yeah. How
He
he
like,
goes
got
did
to
up
the
he use
climbing
there.
the horse
gym.
to climb over? There's some gaps
It's
in that story.
climbing too.
But in terms of the rate at which the prince and Snow White fell in love, Disney definitely got that correct.
Yeah, and they
Yeah.
definitely aged her up.
Yeah,
Again, it's kind of, especially when you read a lot of different versions of Snow White, there are a lot where she is more beautiful than the queen upon birth, or
right,
where she ages in a coffin. She's like in a sleep state, aging. So
right,
it's in that context of that, we're not meant to read her as being seven when
right,
she's getting married. And even that was not standard or normal among royalty. Sometimes young people would be married, but your marriage was not consummated until you were of childbearing age, which still, I'm not holding that up as like the standard we should adhere to as of European royalty. But marrying children was never a normal thing, and don't let the internet tell you otherwise, whether they're
right.
against it or the weirdos who want to go back to it.
Yeah, there's
That's,
also like there's a little gap in there, right? Like it says I would have to double check it, but like it says like well when she was 7, but then it also has that tiny little paragraph where it's like from then on the
yeah.
queen was envious and she couldn't
Yeah.
sleep night and day. She was so upset about this Snow White being princess until she summoned the huntsman one day. So it's like, I mean, we there could be a couple years in between
I would
7 years
hope
old
that
and
she
because
doesn't just immediately go from,
right,
oh, she's the prettiest, I'm gonna kill her. You
right.
know,
Like
like I hope
let's
she
hope
spent
there
a couple
were
years thinking
yes.
about what she should do about that.
That's not your starting line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you got to pull
Yeah.
a Lavana from Winter and scrape her face first and see if that doesn't. And if that doesn't work, then you try to like tarnish her character and
Yeah.
weaken her in the eyes of everyone around them. Like, look, she's dumb and kind of flaky. And when that doesn't work, then you kill her. Like
Do
there's
Yeah.
the kind of stuff
steps.
that they did to Regina George,
Right.
Yeah.
Like
like
there's
give her the
steps
Caltine
involved.
The
bars,
Calcine bars.
You
Yeah.
don't go
Yeah.
straight for the bus.
Yeah.
No,
The bus is
exactly.
the
Exactly.
You
last
don't go
resort.
straight for the bus.
That's
Love
the
it.
episode quote. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it's, I think also it's unclear how much time she spends with the dwarfs. And even in the
Yeah,
movie, it's kind of almost like a day. It's kind of like
it
Beauty and the
feels like a
Beast,
day.
where
It
like
feels
it's
like
a,
she got there in the morning.
yeah. And
Yeah,
but as a kid, I always read like, oh, has been living with them.
right.
Like,
Like she low key is like the new girl in town.
yeah. Whereas it's like
Yeah.
in the movie, it's like she's been there a day, but as a kid, you're like, oh, she lived there like 3 months or
Yeah.
I
year.
mean, it literally shows her sleeping over like one night and then they go to work. So
Yeah.
to me, it feels like a 24-hour period.
I
Right.
think,
I
yeah.
I I have been exposed to this film so much that I honestly cannot tell you what 5-year-old Beth Annie would have said. So this is just like what 35-year-old Beth Annie is thinking. Because like as a child, I don't remember what I thought at a young age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's too long ago. I'm too old now. I don't, too many years have passed.
It's been 84 years. Yeah, this movie begins. Oh, I should point out, I have a core memory of watching this video at my grandparents' house when I broke my leg when I was 7, and the
Aw.
emergency room did not properly handle it. So every time my leg moved, I would like scream in pain, and I was not a screamer. We were not allowed to scream. So
Aw.
that's how my parents, because my mom was like, if you're screaming, I want you to know if you're in pain or not. So then me screaming was like, oh, he's hurt. And so yeah, the we really should have seen the hospital for that one. But yeah, I
You
would like
poor
every time it
thing.
moved, I would scream. But I remember watching this movie with my dad in my grandma's house, so I could like fall because I couldn't fall asleep. Um,
Yeah. I remember, not that this happened, but in the 90s, they had these dual VCRs where you could watch something on a VHS and record to another VHS at the exact same time.
You would never
And my
yeah,
do that.
grandmother would never do that. And I
No.
definitely did not own every Disney movie
No.
via that method.
No.
no,
We're
No.
not
yeah,
saying that.
we're not.
But so like I remember watching it because I remember it got to a point where we had to ask for another one.
Because you watched it so much.
Because we watched it so much. Because kids back in the day, VHS was a literal film, and if you
Yeah.
used it too much and didn't rewind it properly or take care of it properly, as children
Uh-huh.
so often do, the film strip itself would become damaged, and watching the film would be very difficult. There would be spikes, there would be moments of like just blackness, there would be parts where it got stuck, and that it just would never play past like the 52-minute marker. So I remember eventually having like two or three copies of this one because we just watched it so much. This one and Road to El Dorado.
What a
Amazing.
pairing. What
Big
a
The
double
classics in
two
my house.
feature.
genders. There you go.
Yeah, big
Uh,
classics at my house growing up.
I think that we didn't have a bootleg copy
Mm-hmm.
of, I think it was a Goofy movie. I think that
Aw,
was one because I think I distinctly remember it like it's just a plain VHS and it just has,
the tape
the
with the
sticker on
little
it.
dotted lines. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And then it just says Goofy movie.
Goofy movie.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I
Or
did that to
maybe
my,
one of my friends had that.
yeah, one of
Yeah, it
us.
wasn't you, Hannah. It was
Yeah.
definitely a friend.
I did that to my Cinderella VHS, like by one in the case or whatever that we got from the garage sale.
Love it.
That one died. Yeah. So this movie opens with a book intro, like Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, but there is no narrator. You got to read literacy.
Everything.
Yeah, but there's a queen. She's evil. She's vain. She makes Snow White work as a scullery maid because she's envious of her beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And we see her approaching her magic mirror with zodiac signs all around it.
Ooh.
Astrology girlies are shaking.
Yes.
They're like, where do I get that mirror? What anthropology did you get that at?
And she says magic mirror on the wall, not
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
mirror mirror.
And she
Um,
calls the mirror a slave. Did you catch that?
Slave in the
uh-huh.
magic mirror.
A slave in the magic mirror.
She's a slave owner.
Not
Yeah.
Uh,
cool, girl. Not cool.
Mm-mm.
she does. I think the evil queen is so Congress coded. Um,
Yeah.
like, I think when
Yeah.
in
Low
order to
key.
understand Congress, I just have to be like, okay, they're kind of like the evil queen. Like they see other people have love in their lives, they have animals that like them, they're younger, they're prettier, and it's not enough that they have all the wealth and power. They're like, I also need them to suffer and die. Like
Yeah.
because so like when I think of that, I'm like, okay, now Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene
Oh,
and
that's
Mitch
funny
McC
that you went to them. I went to
to Mitch
Mitch
McConnell.
I Mitch
McConnell.
Because
Mc
that's my also. I go to
I
Mitch
went to Mitch
McConnell.
McConnell,
I
turtle
went
face,
to
just
Mitch as well,
staring
but
in the
I like
mirror.
I just really want to make a list now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mitch
Yeah.
McConnell was. I was literally about to say Mitch McConnell because I think he's also very evil queen coded. Yeah,
I mean, just the clothes.
yeah. So that's just like the energy they give to me, and I'm like, now I get it. Everyone in Congress is either the evil queen or that evil judge from Hunchback of Notre Dame,
Hunchback from Notre Dame.
or I guess like the sheriff of Nottingham. One of
The
the three
shell, yeah.
genders. Yeah. So. Yeah, so she's hears that Snow White is beautiful, and she's like Snow White. And then we cut to
She
her,
becomes a pirate temporarily.
yeah, rolls her body, and because she's very the evil queen is very like glamorous 1920s Gilded
Hmm.
Age, Gloria Swanson, Queen Kelly, like look, and then Snow White she's a servant girl. There was an evil queen in Queen Kelly, and then yeah, that movie is a Snow White adaptation. Are we doing? Okay, I can't go down that rabbit hole. Okay, and then there's Snow White. She's dressed in rags. I did meet her once in her rags.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she's working. She's hanging with her doves. And she says, "Can you keep a secret?" Doves XOXO, Gossip Girl. This is a
And the
wishing
doves
well.
say, sure.
And so brief wishing well history. Many, and not just Wikipedia, I found real sources, believe wishing wells evolved from Romano-Celtic and Germanic culture, where coins were thrown into shrines of water to deities like Coventia to grant wishes. And I saw some holy wells in Ireland when I first went, and I remember leaving a scapular there to cure as thanks for curing my depression. That wasn't long term, but
Aw.
you know, it got me by the rest of my junior year I was of college I was okay.
Another Lizzie McGuire throw out, right?
Yeah,
The tossing the coin in the
the
Trevi
Trevi
fountain.
Fountain.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
going to
sorry, I'm
Rome.
still laughing about that. Go ahead. Going to Rome?
I'm going to Rome
Oh my
and
gosh.
I
So
didn't
uh
know we were
exciting.
going to Rome.
yeah, we're going to Rome. After Disneyland, we're going to Rome. And
We changed our plans.
my cousin was like, or Rafa's cousin was like, honestly, my top priority is the Trevi Fountain. Everything else, you
Is it
know,
like a romantic getaway? Is it like a family trip?
it's a family trip. We're going with Rafa's family. So it should be
Ooh,
fun. Yeah.
yeah, that sounds great.
Um,
I do want to point out, just because I am Romanian, so there are childhood stories that you hear from grandparents. Wishing wells are also a way to, what is a way to say this? So
ooh,
you would wish for your loved ones to survive
Mm.
if they had been turned.
into a
Because us
vampire.
Romanians believe in vampires, and wishing wells were one of the ways that you could pay tribute to someone who was lost before they became one of the strigoi, which is the Romanian word for vampire. You could sacrifice your family's hard-earned coin in exchange for the saving of your loved one's soul.
So you really do need to write a vampire romance, is what I'm getting,
I
because you
know.
have all this unique family
Yeah.
folklore.
It's just one of those things, like, and I wonder if anyone else who's like Romanian might have that, like, you just have a pocket in your brain of like, this is the story my grandmother told me. Obviously, it's true. My grandmother would never lie to me.
And that's
She
facts.
made
And
me
that's on period,
videos.
Piglet.
I mean,
Yeah.
she may or may not have made me videos.
You
She
may-
would never,
Listen,
she would
lying
never
and
lie to me.
piracy are not the same thing.
True
No.
story, true story. Yeah.
And so the prince hears this song, he hears this singing. That's his official name, the prince.
The
He has some
prince, yeah.
fandom popular names like
The is
Ferdinand or
his first name, Prince
Florian.
is his
I was
last
just
name.
say the is his name.
Yeah, the hears the singing. He hops in
The
and he surprises her as she's singing, and she runs away up to the balcony and is like, "This is by a better angle." Comes out and presents herself as he
Yeah.
sings one song, and she
hmm
sends the dove with a kiss. So they kiss via dove, kiss via tweet, RAP, and the dove blushes. Um, and I have a headcanon here that I think is supported via text, but is not intended by the filmmakers, or at least from my understanding.
I'm all
I
ears.
think I think Snow White and the Prince knew each other. I think they were
Mm.
sweethearts because she says, "I'm wishing for the one I love to find me
Do you think
today."
maybe they were sending like messages through like a carrier pigeon, but it was the dove?
They were pen pals.
Yeah.
Charlie
And
Brown,
Interesting.
Cassie from Of Slippers and Spindles, one of her favorite romance tropes is
pen
pen
pals,
pals.
pen pals.
So Cassie, I know you're listening. Go write that fanfic for me.
So they're sending messages or like I just feel like they were like sweethearts, and then when the queen took control and made her a maid, like he no longer
Yeah,
saw her at events. So then maybe they became
at
pen
events.
pals, like royal things.
Yeah.
And so it's like so she's just surprised because she hasn't seen him in a while. And so she like panics and she's like, wait. Because then he says, now that I found you, hear what I
Yeah.
have to
Hear what I have
say.
to say.
So it's
Can
like
I do want to ask simply, and I know we talked about this like off air, simply because there has been a lot of
discourse,
eyeballs
eyeballs.
discourse on the upcoming adaptation and the actresses, the main actress who was cast as Snow White, and her interpretations of the original film. And there's a very like famous quote where she said that the prince stalked Snow White. Is this like the moment that she was referring to? Because I know watching the film for our recording, the whole time I was like, where is he stalking? I'm looking for this. I'm looking for this. Because I didn't recall it previous to that interview. And so watching it today, I was like, which part is she referring to? Is it this part? Is it where he shows up later with the coffin? Because
Right.
that's it. That's his whole experience in the film, is just those two scenes.
I guess she
That's a
was
good
looking
point.
for her post this. So I guess you could call that
Oh,
stalking.
okay.
That's a way of
I
interpretation.
think that's reaching, but I see your
Yeah.
argument. Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's I think just to be direct with my take on it, it's I feel like Rachel Zegler is repeating a very common internet discourse or view of the film, which tends to
Yeah.
interpret things in the most negative way possible for
Right.
clickbait. Cue, oh, the
Right.
prince is actually 30. Where in this
Right.
film does it say he's 30 and
Or the
she's
lyrics to
14?
Baby It's Cold Outside.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Yes.
the blurred lines of Christmas songs, as Hannah
Thank you
Fansler
very
says.
much.
But
They famously say that.
there's context for the time period of Baby It's Cold Outside, just like there's context for the lyrics of Blurred
Okay.
Lines.
Okay.
Like when you say, I know you want it, outside of our current cultural context, okay, oh, he knows that she wants it. But in our cultural context of how people talk about sexual
It and what
interaction,
it represents. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a interpretation. So I think you could say, oh, this is stalking, but is that a fair interpretation?
Right. Because the other thing is that um the stalking also implies danger. And in the interactions that she has with him, I don't sense that she doesn't want to be near him. Like she runs away,
Yeah.
but he doesn't pursue her up there.
Yeah,
Like, for instance, in Sleeping Beauty,
he's a little handsy.
he's a little
He's
handsy. We
handsy
kind of talked
for
about that. So like
sure.
this, I like what you're saying about like maybe they were like pen pals or something. Like it does seem like there's a different rapport here, and I don't sense danger. I'm very charmed by it, you know?
So my question is, well, you mentioned that there were scenes cut that
Yeah.
involved more backstory for the prince. Perhaps they
Mm.
would have filled in these holes.
I think it
What
was
were the
something
cut
with like the
scenes?
queen wanted him. And then when he was like, I don't want to be
Oh,
with you, she locked him up. And then
okay.
there's a skeleton a talking skeleton named Oswald, I think. And then the animals
Love
help
this.
him escape. And then he goes to save Snow White.
Okay.
So very like Philip was tied up by
What a
Maleficent. The fairies came
stalker.
to, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I also think that we've talked about this in other live action adaptations is that, Disney interacting with its own brand and the
Yeah.
fact that it's trying to retcon things that are now just out of cultural norms that they previously had advertised, right?
Right.
She's basically just a vocal piece for that,
Yeah.
being the young actress in this role. So like
Yeah.
they could just be being like, yeah, you should be like talking about like the BuzzFeedification kind
Right.
of point. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also because I think of her was in Shazam when they asked, what excited you about being in this world of superheroes? And she's like, I wanted to get paid or like just I wanted a job. And so I
Yeah.
feel like her saying that, like if she was cast and Snow White was a literal replica of this movie, she'd be like, yep, it's great. Because I'm like, she wants a job.
Yeah. It also
yeah,
makes me think of like her during the like Screen Actors Guild strike, is that the right word? When
That
she was
yes.
strike.
interviewed for that, she was like, if I have to walk around if I have to walk around as a Disney princess 8 hours a day, I better get paid for it. That
Yeah.
was
I
something that
mean,
she also said. So girl
Adriana
just
didn't
really likes having
get
her rent paid and eating dinner is like what really is going on. Because
relatable.
that's me, like
Yeah.
with my job, I'm like, can I get paid?
Yeah.
Like I'm a teacher and anytime they want us to do extra stuff, I'm like, do we get extra duty pay? Because they always say no, and then it's like an extra 7 hours a week.
And you're
But
like,
so like
oh,
if that's Rachel Ziegler's like perspective is like, well, if I'm working, I really should get paid for it. Like I'm on your side, girl. I would love to get
Yeah.
paid. Yeah.
yeah, we all want to be paid.
Yeah. Electricity is great. I would also like to pay my bills.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll talk about the costume choices of that dress in the live action when we get to that movie. Because Sandy Powell. You're usually such an icon. What's happening?
Right.
What's going on is that they meet and then we cut to the queen glaring above them. She's pissed at this development. And that's a fun thing at Disneyland in like the Square Fantasyland. They have
Hmm.
like a window above the Snow White ride and you can see the evil queen peering down, pissed that you're all
Oh.
having a good time.
That
And
envious
That's
heart.
funny.
yeah, envious heart knows no rest, and she's she's too jelly and she's not ready. So
Yeah.
she summons the huntsman and is like, take her to pick flowers, and then kill her. And the huntsman is like,
Bring
what?
me her heart.
Bring me her
Bring me her
heart.
heart as proof. And
It,
in one of the fairy tale versions, doesn't she eat the heart?
yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
belief that you could like gain the
Right.
beauty or the abilities of the
Right.
person. And so she's like, yeah, bring me her heart. And the huntsman is like, she's a child. Like, what's happening? But she's like, don't defy me. So he takes her out. She's flower picking, and she has her save the bird moment. She sees the little baby bird and is like, oh, let me help you find your mom and dad. Like, you're all alone. It's like the bird and Snow White are in the same situation. They're all alone. And so she's like, let me,
Yeah.
like, it's such a sweet scene, while also being scary because she's being so sweet to that adorable little bird, and she's like helping him, and the huntsman is about to kill her. And I think it's interesting because in a lot of fairy tale versions, it's implied he doesn't kill her because of her beauty, and so I think people have described that as being Snow White, the Disney version. But it seems if you're
Hmm.
watching the film, it seems to be much more that like she's so good and kind that he's like, how could I cold-blooded murder this girl who, while she's literally helping a bird, like a
A poor
baby bird?
defenseless bird who got lost. She's like helping the bird find home, and he's like, this girl needs to die.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, 100%.
And
I
she,
do. Sorry, am I allowed to draw reference to Lunar Chronicles?
yeah, I think that's a Lunar Chronicles podcaster.
There is actually a really good crossover in Winter by Marissa Meyer, the version that she does of Snow White, where Winter is helping young children, and that's what triggers the queen into saying that she needs to be offed.
Yeah.
And the spoiler alert, if you haven't read Winter, please do, and then go listen to my podcast. Um, the huntsman in that story, one of the reasons he does not kill her is because of her devotion to animals and small children. So I just thought that was like a really good thing to focus on because we have that kind of overlap is like we have a 20 we have a 21st century version of this story that still goes back to that concept of like, well, this is a good, kind person. Uh we can't kill someone so good and kind simply for the vainness of this godless woman as
This
she's described.
Yeah.
godless. Yeah.
I just really love that that was her description. My
Yeah.
godless stepmother.
Yeah. That's the
Next time
worst
I
thing
see my
about her.
stepdad, I'm gonna be like, "Are you godless?" I'm just
You
gonna wait for
God.
him to be like, "What are you talking about?"
So he's like, run, the queen wants to kill you because he can't do it. And she's shaken because she was almost murdered. So
Right.
he's
Yeah.
like, run, run. And she's like, okay. And she flees. She's freaking out. Everything's scary to her. Scary trees with eyes are grabbing at her. This was the scene I loved to play as a kid. Like, ah.
This
Uh,
is the scene, one of the scenes that made England be like, our kids can't watch this, it's too scary. And
yeah.
watching
Yeah.
it for this episode, I was like, it's not so bad. Like it's a little flashy. That's the part that bothered me, but
I
because
was
the like
scared
the
as a
lights
kid.
bother me. Yeah.
I remember being like,
Yeah.
"Oh no, it's coming," you know.
Yeah, but I also think like because we've seen so much content, we're like way more
Mm-hmm.
sensitized,
Yeah.
desensitized. But like back then, I could imagine like I could side with some of those parents being like, yeah, maybe
Well,
our
also
little
you have
kids
to
should
think
see
in
it.
context of the film. People were not
Mhm.
watching these films like at home on the weekend.
Oh yeah.
They were
Yeah,
seeing this film in a dark theater
with
Hmm.
kids
with
who weren't as familiar with like this is how the story ends.
right. And
Yep.
then they were watching it through the eyes of these children. And it's not like they had theater lights on the floor. This is a
Right.
Yeah.
dark theater. The only light you are provided, there's no like red exit sign in the corner. The only light you are
No.
provided is from the projection film. So
Yeah.
imagine being in this beautiful theater and you're watching this like pretty princess and these birds, and then all of a sudden it goes really dark and there's flashing lights and there's really scary music, and the main character that you're supposed to be like supporting is traumatized and screaming and freaking out. Like now we have context. And I think that's why
Yeah.
it's important to acknowledge the difference between a 2025 experience with a film and
Hmm.
a 1937 experience with a film, because it's two very different. I watched this
That,
at home on my couch in my
Yeah,
pajamas, like,
same.
yeah. That, like you said, Cullen, like that would be an interesting moment in time to travel back to, like
Yeah,
watching this film in theaters the first time it's ever come out with a bunch of people who are new to just like seeing these types of movies and just
Yeah.
and
like,
probably don't know the source material.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
that would be really, really fascinating to see.
And I think it does really hold up as a sequence. Like it's
Yeah.
terrifying. And I get what because she's like, okay, I'm about to be murdered. I'm alone in the woods at night.
Yeah,
Like, is,
Everything is morphing. Like it's
yeah,
probably totally fine, but things are turning into monsters that
right.
aren't. It's the animation is also really good. Like it's really cool.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And so she just like, she basically is having a panic attack. She's overwhelmed. She collapses. And then some of those scary eyes, it turns out, were just cute little animals watching her.
That's a
Uh,
really nice scene.
Hmm.
Like the meadow like slowly getting brighter, and the reveal that some of the things that were scaring her were just distorted, or like Hannah said, morphed
Hmm.
visuals of what was actually going on. Like that's a really nice scene to pull us out of that traumatized state.
I
Yeah.
think it's great for kids too, in a way, because it's
Hmm.
also like saying that some of the things you're afraid of maybe aren't so scary. It's just how you feel because it's the
Good
dark,
point.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like it's
Yeah.
like, and she says, oh, she like sees them. She's like, oh, don't run away. And she's like, I'm so ashamed of the fuss I made, and all because I was afraid. I've been so frightened. And I think that's something people forget. They're like, oh my gosh, she's so easily scared. But she's like, this is very much like
She acknowledges it.
a maturing
Yeah.
moment where she's like, I worked myself up and I'm calming myself down
Yeah.
and I'm like relatable. I think that's a,
Emotional control.
yeah.
Yeah.
We love
And
it.
boundaries.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so she's like, what do you do when things go wrong? And the birds sing and she's like, oh, you sing a song with a smile and a song.
This is actually like very 2025 applicable, because it's like, I just had a terrible panic attack. I don't know how to combat this. Like, what do you suggest? Hashtag
Yeah, it is.
hashtag breakdown in the woods. And then everybody's commenting, and the birds are like, well, I like to sing. And she's like, that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's very, this movie is very self-care, as Hannah pointed
Yes.
out. Hannah
Yeah.
texted me and she's like, this movie is all about self-care.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
literally like later on when she's like, "Oh, well, you know what? Cleaning is gonna make this place just like look better and everyone will feel better." I'm
And
like, "You're
feel
right.
better.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna feel better when I clean my house. I should do that. Thank you, Snow White." Like,
No,
a
100%. That's
self-care
me
queen.
sometimes. Like, my class will be a complete mess, and I'm like, I do not want to deal with this. And then 6 hours later, I feel so much better
Yeah.
that my home is like, laundry is actually put away and not just like folded and in a basket in the living room, which is a bad habit of ours.
Okay, wow, are you
Um,
sitting in my living room right now? I'm staring at it.
no, that's Quentin has a bad habit of folding it and then just like leaving it wherever he folded it. So like
Mm,
Yeah.
then
I
my
yeah,
brain is like, okay, I'll put it in the basket and then he'll put it away. And then
same.
it just lives in the basket until it's time to
Basket.
get washed again. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like a little basket limbo situation.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
absolutely.
but I also wanted to point out, because Cullen mentioned like people being afraid of the darkness or whatever. Is there's this theory that like people aren't actually afraid of the dark itself. They're afraid of what's hidden in the dark that they cannot see. So they're
Yeah.
really not necessarily afraid of the dark, they're afraid of the unknown. And in this context, I feel like once it's revealed to Snow White what's actually happening, she's no longer afraid. And so she genuinely is fearful of the unknown. She was in a catatonic state. She had someone that she trusted hold a weapon to her and say that he knew he was supposed to kill her, but he couldn't, and you better run away because the queen wants to kill you. And then she's immediately overwhelmed by everything around her. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I can get overwhelmed just being 20 minutes late for work. Like,
Yeah.
this is 100% relatable.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
bet you it was noon that entire time this is
Yeah,
happening. It
midday.
only got dark because she was like starting to faint, you know?
Or
Yeah.
like the sun went away behind a cloud for like 5 minutes and it's
Yeah,
just like
exactly.
really bad timing.
Yeah. She was really
Exactly.
dehydrated.
Right.
Yeah.
She was picking too many flowers, not drinking enough water.
Yeah. And again, relatable. And this is, I
Yeah.
think, with the smile in a song is like, I think her like peak character moment because there's also
Yeah.
this lyric where she's like, "Remember, you're the one who can fill the world with sunshine," which is very much like how she presents as a person. Like she's filling the world of the people around her with like light and positivity. And like making like she has a pretty horrifying existence, but she makes it happy for herself
Right.
as her own coping mechanism. And so we see the most adorable little animals. We get some quails, some deer, families. I like to believe the bluebird family is the same as the ones that she helped
I do
because like
too.
that bird is
That's
like her
canon.
Yeah.
bestie. Yeah, and it's like
Yeah, that's
obviously like
canon.
I feel like that bird also they spread the message like, "Oh, she's really nice."
Yeah.
And
Like
that's why
we
the
need
animals
her
are
help,
like,
guys. Come on. They went
yeah.
they
Hmm.
did the all call to the forest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
they're posting it next door. Like if you see this scared girl, like she needs a place to live. Um, so she's like, "Do you know of a place I can stay? Because I can't sleep in the ground or in a tree." And they're like, "Oh." So they take her to the cottage in this very like it's a beautiful sequence of her trotting along with the animals. Um, and she's like, okay, let's see who lives here. Let's see who's home. And she's like, okay, this place is messy and everything's small. Okay, maybe children are all by their alone and they don't have a mother.
Yeah.
And so it's like she's like in a way like projecting her mother wound on the world constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she's like, all right, like let's clean it up and then they'll have to let me stay because they'll be happy I cleaned. And we get the iconic number, Whistle While You Work. Which a lot of these like a lot of this movie is like cartoon gags, like with the
Yeah.
animals and stuff. But as a kid, like that turtle hit for me. I loved that turtle
I
when they're
have
like
so
washing
yeah.
Yes.
on the
Yeah.
turtle, and he's always like a
I
few steps behind. I'm like hilarious.
I have such a thing for turtles. Like there's a collection of turtles in my home and I've always wanted a turtle as a pet. But watching that scene, I was just like, as a child, I think I probably would have associated it with the tortoise and the hare.
Oh yeah.
Because like the turtle is always so slow that it just can't seem to catch up with everybody else. And so by the time it's done, the turtle's just like, seriously? All right,
Yeah.
up we go.
Yeah, my top criticism of this film is that I needed a shot of the turtle in the final sequence. That's my
Yeah,
one.
yeah. I needed
Like,
to know that he was okay and that nobody forgot about him and left him behind again. Like
yeah.
I need to know that he's not at the bottom of the hill while everybody else is waving goodbye to the prince and Snow White.
Yeah, I want the turtle to have his moment.
Yeah. So
But
any
that
artists out there, draw that for us, please.
yeah, just so
If
we
you
feel
share it
good.
to if you send it to Prince Kai Fan Pod on Instagram, I will repost it.
Yeah. Um, so she's with the animals, she's cleaning, great gags like with they're like trying to dust the stuff under the rug or like lick the plates with their tongues, which are kind of all things you do as a kid when you're like
Well, my favorite is them
cleaning.
shoving it into the mouse hole and then
And
the
the
mice
mouse.
the
Yeah.
mice kick it back out like "Brr, brr, brr, brr." Like that
Yeah.
was hilarious.
Yeah. And it's a fun little number. And so she's whistling while she works, and then the dwarves are working in their gem mine. They're hi-hoing it up. And we get them, okay, worked in the gem, like we dig for gems, we don't really know why. And then they go off, like they finish their shift. Dopey locks up the vault and leaves the
And then
key
puts the
right
key
there.
next to it.
Yeah, this is a
Smart.
great neighborhood,
So
this
yeah, I mean,
community
what is the
supports each
bluebird's
other.
gonna come in and steal their diamonds?
Yeah, the birds don't need diamonds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
And even carry on.
so they're heading off home, and she is looking around, and she sleeps in their beds because she's just tired, so she falls down for a nap. Um, and the dwarves show up, and they're like, somebody's in our house. Like the light is on, there's food.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then they hear her groan. They're like, it's a ghost. I'm gonna keep the light off for this sequence because it's spooky.
Spooky.
And the birds are like messing with them. Like it's just like the dwarves
Oh,
freaking
that
out.
part was so great.
Yeah. They're just having fun. The animals are like, we're nice, but let's be a little silly. And the dwarves eventually, after like sending Dopey in, and he causes a mess, and they're like, okay, let's just kill her, let's go up and kill this
That's
ghost.
obviously the solution.
And they like pull the sheet, and they're like, oh, it's a human, it's a girl. And Bash was like, she's like an angel. And she wakes up and is like, oh, hi. And Bella Swan could never. She instantly starts putting together what their names
Oh
are.
yeah, you
Yeah.
must be. Yeah.
Yeah, she's like,
Bella
okay,
Swan would be like, I don't care.
yeah. Bella
Bella Swan would be
famously,
like, "Have you read Wuthering Heights? It's what makes me unique as a 17-year-old."
yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Bella can never remember anyone's name, so let alone actively learn and connect them. Yeah. The dwarves are Snow White is instantly connecting with them. She's like, okay, bashful, sneezy, sleepy, happy. Doc, who's always getting his words jumbled, dopey. He can't talk none.
So,
He's never tried.
funny story. Have you guys watched How I Met Your Mother?
I've seen
Watch
it. I don't
some,
know if
yeah.
I've seen every episode, but
Okay,
I used to
there's
see it
an
a lot.
episode where one of the characters reveals that she's really creeped out by Doc because the guy went to medical school and he hangs out in the cottage with a bunch of minors, and there's no explanation for that. So, so it does make me wonder, like, well, what makes him Doc?
Doc. I think he's read a book. This is whatever,
Done.
15th century Germany or whatever. Like
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
he's read a book and he like knows herbs. He's definitely a
Mm.
homeopathic medicine.
Medicine. He's like an alchemist.
Yeah, essential
Yeah.
Yeah,
oils, gummies. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I don't think he's been to medical school.
I don't think
Just
that
like he
man's been
just
to
like dabbles
medical
in
school.
apothecary, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I
I
just
agree.
always thought that was so funny.
that is a funny bit. That
That's
is a
funny
good.
that you guys are talking about these funny things. You know what I thought about when I saw Dopey? All I thought was that man has a son.
Oh,
Dopey fucks.
Dopey fucks and has Doug in The Descendants. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Haven't
Don't.
watched it, so that just went over my head. But yeah.
Blessed to
Our
you.
connection with Dopey is one of our dog Beowulf, who you guys know as the dog that ate a live lizard and didn't bother to chew it or kill it before he ate it, so it
Yeah.
started trying to come back up. So he had to go
Damn.
to the vet, which is why we had to reschedule our appointment from
Ah,
before. Um, but
Dogs.
we call him Dopey because he's the
Because he
sweetest
can't
dog.
talk.
He's so sweet, but no, he talks all the time. He's the sweetest dog, but he's just dumb as a box of rocks. All he
man.
wants is attention. Like the Dopey, like running back into the house and coming back around to get kisses. That's totally Beowulf. That's totally Beowulf.
Yeah, I do love how accepting they are that Dopey just can't talk. He's never tried. And
Right, like he's just mute. Nobody cares why.
yeah,
Yeah. And they
And
don't
there's
yep.
no
make fun of
explanation. It's
him.
just part of who he is.
Yeah, they don't make fun of him. It's just like everyone has their thing, and that's cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They even accept Grumpy, podcast incel Grumpy. Um, it is watching him is like he's like modern. It's like watching modern internet discourse because he's like, you can't trust women and they're wicked wiles, and they're like, what are wicked wiles? I don't know, but they'll get you.
I love that. What are wicked wiles? I love that. I also feel like Grumpy just represents the honesty in the show, right? Like all these guys are like, "Oh, she's pretty. It's okay if she stays here." And Grumpy is like, "Yeah, I mean, she's pretty, but like she still walked into a stranger's house and started
Yeah.
touching all of their stuff and ate their food. Like, what if we didn't want it to be cleaned up? And why is she in my bed? Now I have to wash the sheets, and I obviously don't like cleaning. Like,
Yeah.
so I feel like Grumpy also gets to be the voice of reason.
And he is the one who's like, the Wicked Queen, she could be invisible. She could be here right now.
I loved that. She could be invisible.
And Snow White's like, she can't find me here. She's like, I sang a song, I feel better. I don't care about the where the evil queen
I
is.
really love that like Grumpy knows that she's a witch with all these magical powers and she's evil, but like Snow White didn't know that. And Snow White like grew up with her.
Yeah, Snow White
Like, where's
just
Grumpy getting his info from? Who's Grumpy's source?
Grumpy is on Reddit a lot. That's just the he's
Yeah,
on
that's what it
Reddit.
is.
Yeah, he's on the Queen. The Queen is a witch subreddit, and
Yeah,
this because that definitely intersects with his like Meninist
yeah.
subreddit. Maybe the biggest fantasy of this movie is that he can be converted over to respecting women with love and kindness. Um, but she's like, please don't turn me out. So they keep her. They keep her there. She's like, well, I made food, and they're like, food, which is
All is
brew.
forgiven.
Yeah. She's making a soup, but they're gonna eat, and she's like, wash, COVID people, hand sanitizer. Did we learn nothing from 2020? So
Obviously.
they go out to wash. We get the washing musical number, which a quote I think of all the time is the "What a fine bunch of water lilies you turned out to be," is what he calls. He's basically calling them gay. Like he's like, "You're all gay for washing," which is seems like very 2025 male podcast discourse. Which is hilarious. And also one of my notes was butts because there's a lot of brushing people's butts in this number. Um, there's also the bit with Dopey and the bubble, which I always remembered, and the
Hmm.
fly in the bubble. Love those bits. Love
Everything
some
with Dopey is amazing.
kids. Just, I mean, again, this movie wasn't just for kids, right? But like,
Right. It was targeted at adults. Kids were
yeah,
like, "Oh, I didn't know kids were gonna like Disney. Now I have a whole new market plan for the rest of my career."
yeah. And but it's like these gags just hit because like I work in animation, right? And we people will talk about like we people talk about like jokes and what hits and stuff, and I'm like, sometimes like those gags like Dopey swallowing a bubble, the fly in
Right.
the bubble, or that like the turtles like them washing on his ribs, like I remember those as kids, and I was like, that's comedy. Uh
I mean, it is. Like I'm a grown adult. I'm 35 years old, and that was probably one of the funniest sequences was them getting washed up. Like everything in the cottage with the dwarves and Snow White is funny and wholesome, and it brings to light the part of the story that's not depressing. And I
yeah.
think that that's the part that we try to focus on because like we talked about earlier, we're putting expectations of 2025 on a
Mhm.
1937 film. We can't really do that. And this is one of those, it's just wholesome.
Yeah.
I know she's like doing the cooking and the cleaning, and that's not fair to girls. Girls have more potential than that. That's fine. But like in the context of like, look, they have that like that whole scene where they're like singing and dancing for her to like
Yeah.
entertain her because she spent all day cleaning for them. Like, ugh, I just thought it was really sweet.
It's also the Great
Yeah.
Depression, and
Yeah,
being
we
able
need
to
some
afford
happy.
a meal and washing and stuff are all luxuries. So it's like, look
Yeah.
at this happiness. Um, so they're just kind of like this is what's going on with the queen with we'll get to the queen, but Snow White, yeah, they're singing the silly song. They're dancing, they're playing with their instruments. There's a brief Asian joke that didn't age well. But again, for a movie 1937, I'm surprised that there wasn't more weird race stuff. So,
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's just they're having fun, they're chilling, she's clapping. It's like very folksy that they're all just like singing a song together, hanging out. And they're having the fun that the queen, despite all her wealth and power, cannot have because she's got a jealous heart.
Yeah.
Um,
And she's a godless woman.
and she's a
I got my
godless
She's a
light on,
woman.
godless
so it's not
woman.
really dark in here now. Sorry. I realized it was like I was in like a cloud of darkness. I wouldn't turn the light on. Um, I wanted
Yeah.
to ask Cullen, from your perspective, and Hannah, you too, obviously. But you mentioned this earlier, so that's why I'm picking on you. From your perspective, when we compare this to like the Grimm's Snow White, where do you think that this would fit in? This like cute, wholesome moment that we have in the cottage, like where would that fit into the original lore that we talked about earlier?
I think it's like they say she stays with them and then like
Right.
stuff keeps happening. So I feel like this is just part of that timeline of like, well, there she spends months with the dwarves or years or even. It's like they
What are they
bond
doing
and
during
form
that
their
time?
relationship. Yeah. And I
Okay,
think
okay.
Disney was very smart to focus on the characters of the dwarves and their colorful personalities. And spoilers for the rest of Snow White month, I don't think anyone has ever come close to kind of capturing like a whole cast of seven with distinctive
100%.
personalities that people really remember.
100%.
And I remembered them and I got extra credit on a test in college once because that was an
That a
extra credit
boy.
question. Yeah. The seven
Wow.
dwarves.
Yeah.
And like they're all like you like I feel like Doc, Grumpy, and Dopey are like the big three. And then but the
Right.
other ones you can point them out.
Yeah, I
And
don't know many people who are buying the sneezy shirt being like, yeah, that's me, sneezy, you know.
But
but
it is interesting to point out that some of them it's a personality thing, and then Sneezy it's just
He's
like
got hay
pollen
fever.
season or something.
yeah.
Like yeah, hay fever, like Flynn Rider said.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like this very there's a heart to the film is her
Hmm.
relationship with the dwarves. Like
Yeah.
that they really impress upon each other. And it's just very like it's wholesome. There's an antagonistic element with Grumpy, but even Grumpy is playing the piano as they sing. He's like, I hate being a
I
part
love
of
him
this.
playing the piano and like scooting back and forth. It's like he's not grumpy right now.
Yeah. And it's just
Really,
yeah,
grumpy just is like post cal is like in a pre-caffeine world.
he just needs coffee.
Like
Same with
he
Sleepy.
just needs his Starbucks and then he's
Yeah.
fine. Like if someone would just get him his star, or maybe after a long day at work, he needs an adult beverage. I don't know. I don't necessarily promote that, but maybe he just needed like a nice whiskey and he would have been fine.
Yeah, and Doc is like it's gonna mess with your body humors. Your
Yeah,
yellow
exactly.
bile. Yeah. So while they're having a great old time, the godless woman, the stepmother,
The
she
godless queen that she is.
she finds out that she's got the heart of a pig. And because she's like, look, this is Snow White's heart mirror. And he's like, beyond the seven jeweled hills and the seven falls, Snow White's fairest of them all. So she trashes that box and she
Yeah.
does the most iconic cape swirl
Oh
as she
my
like
God, I love
swirls
it.
down those stairs to her dungeon. So
Another thing
poised.
Bella Swan could never.
Yeah,
No one
because
could ever. That
The
you're not
Volturi
topping that.
wish they
Yeah.
could.
The Volturi wish.
and so she goes down to she has such a fun lair. Like I love all her potions and alchemy and astrology books.
Yes.
Uh and she is like I love the ingredients that I have a game called Villainous where you can play as Disney villains and part of playing as the queen is like collecting all her fun ingredients, which is really fun.
Ooh, that's fun.
But she makes a potion with mummy dust, a hag's cackle, a scream of fright, the black of night, wind and a thunderbolt, a wind to fan her hate. She's a proud hater, and
Do we
she,
think that like she gathers these materials or is it like on her grocery list?
yeah,
Like she
Yeah.
like like she has like Nigel the butler or something and she's
yeah,
Yeah.
like,
he's going
"Hey,
up to
I'm
hags,
actually
cackle
out
into
of
this.
a right, like I'm out of the fright. Would you mind grabbing some for me while you're at Costco? Because I have this potion I'm gonna make later. So I really
Yeah.
need fright if you don't mind,
She
thanks."
does the Instacart delivery.
Yeah, Instacart.
Instacart.
Yeah, they're
This is the
having,
off-brand
Uber
fright. It's not
Eats.
gonna have the same impact on my potion.
yeah. She's like, I have to, and to get a good hag cackle, I have to go on Etsy.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Then I have to
Yeah,
wait 3 weeks for it to come in the mail, and then it's
Uh-huh.
never as advertised.
And of
yeah.
course, shipping is way more expensive because it's coming from
So much
across
more
the world.
expensive.
Yeah, Timu Black of Night isn't cutting it. So she takes her potion and it's such a beautiful irony, right? Because to defend her being the fairest in the land against like just the fact that we're all going to age and
Sure.
their youth and beauty will always be new and we're all going to get older. But in order
But
to,
that's still a concern in 2025 that people are always talking about.
yeah,
Yeah.
what did Kim Kardashian say? I've got 10 good years left in me. And someone was like,
Yeah.
what a depressing way to view
Well, I
yourself.
mean, even in your career, like Taylor Swift said that like she's like, I don't know if I'll be a success like 5 years ago when she did her documentary, but
Yeah.
she mentioned like there's not a lot of successful pop stars after the age of 30. Like this might be one of my last chances to capitalize on my success. And she's obviously the exception to one of those rules, right? Like she's right
Yeah.
up there with like Beyonce and Madonna. Like some people are just ageless or Cher, for example. You guys seen Cher
Share.
lately?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. But
Wagging the old Watusi. Yeah.
oh my goodness. But it is still like a concern. Like beauty and vapidity are still a very prominent part of our culture, especially with the lies that are social media and advertising and magazines and like Target came under fire a few years ago for all their airbrushing and now everything they do is no airbrush and it's there's still, and that was like 5 years ago that they switched to that. They're still the only ones doing it
Yeah.
because we live in a world, we live in a society where perfection is more important than honesty.
Google fat removal. You can't even have
Oh
a
yeah.
face.
Can't have, yeah,
Yeah,
you can't, you have to have cheekbones that have lines. It's like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. My sister one time took a picture of me with a filter, and it was like one of those like snow filters,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
but it like was on Snapchat and it automatically like smoothed out your face. And my face has freckles.
Hmm.
So it was really creepy
Yeah.
because all of my freckles were gone.
Yeah,
And
you're
so
like,
like
that's
she
not
texted
me.
a picture to my husband and he was like, "Oh."
Yeah. It's like it's
Because it changes so much.
hmm
That's how I feel about AI art in
Oh
I'm
my
one of the
goodness,
many negative
yes.
things, but everyone looks like a little too airbrushed and like
Yeah,
perfecty, and you're like, it's missing that humanity.
yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like that. The thing is, that's still really relevant, and that she
very
ages
relevant.
herself as a form of to defend herself from this is just like
Right.
because so many times we see surgeries or things done to look younger that just make you look older, or just the
Right.
concept of maybe what the mirror was talking about is that Snow White's inner beauty. You know, like Snow White's
Yeah,
the most
that's never really
beautiful,
established.
but it's like the
Hmm.
queen is so focused on being beautiful, and Snow White, I think that's another unfair criticism is, oh, Snow White only cares about her looks. Snow White really, like, she brushes herself up
She
when she
never
sees the
mentions her
prince.
looks at all.
It's like unimportant to her, which can
Yeah,
play into that she's beautiful, but she doesn't know it, the whole kind of trope. But
which
like,
is, I mean, but again, like these are tropes that we didn't really talk about in
no,
1937. This is like,
yeah,
it's like saying, well, that was a manic pixie dream girl. Okay, well, did they have that in 1937?
no,
No.
It's not
yeah,
like other girls. Again, that's a modern day concept that we're
Yeah.
trying to lend something from
yeah.
1937
Someone's
on.
like, Joan
Yeah.
of Arc was so doing the not like other girls thing. And it's like, you know,
And people burned her. So,
yeah,
let,
she dealt with it.
she don't, we do what we can with what we're given.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of the concept that she wants to be the most beautiful person in the world, but in order to achieve that, she has to first remove all of the beautiful components she already does have and make herself a quote hag. So
Watch
now
herself
Yeah.
age
she
before
has to be
herself.
the ugliest person in the world in order to obtain being the most beautiful person in the world. Like there's got to be a reversal spell somewhere. Otherwise, it doesn't matter if she kills Snow White. A million other people are going to be above
Yeah.
her in beauty.
Right.
I think it just shows how when you're so like narrow-minded and hateful, you'll
Yeah.
sabotage yourself
You'll
to destroy
sink
someone else.
to, yeah, you'll sink to lows you never thought possible.
Yeah.
Like
I
I
love
will
that
give up
self-sabotage.
the the beauty that I do have to become very ugly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like well you I think also like she has to be like the ugliness that's inside her has to come out because she's doing something so heinous, like so ugly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
And
she
we
and
see
It's
that a
like
lot in Disney, right?
yeah.
Like thinking of my other favorite Disney movie with like Mother Gothel immediately
Yes.
becoming, yeah.
Same. I was just thinking that too. Like you have to see it's almost like she has to see herself exactly as she really is, like as ugly as
Yeah.
she is, potentially is like as a way to be like, okay, are you really gonna go through with this? Okay,
Yeah.
you are. So it's like your last chance
Yeah.
before being able to redeem yourself before going too far.
And it's
Yeah, we
very
went too far.
interesting that she has to watch it happen too. She sees
Yes.
Yeah.
herself age, she feels that, and it's like
It
you're
like
doing this.
empowers her too. Like she
Yeah.
scares the bird and she's like, haha, I scared you. And then like she sees the skeleton and kicks the empty mug at him and is like, have a drink. Ah, I'm so funny. Let me laugh at my own joke. Like it very
Yeah.
strangely empowers her at the same time. Like it invigorates her.
It's like she's her true
Yeah.
self.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And again, it's very interesting that this is not a competition to Snow White at all.
Right.
Like
She's
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 like,
oblivious.
yeah, like sometimes
Yeah.
we all when you have a hater, they're like competing with you and you're like, I'm living my life. Like you're
Right.
not I'm not even thinking about what's going on with you, but
Hmm.
like I'm
Right.
taking up all this space. Like Snow White
This
doesn't
is a
care.
one-sided nemesis
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so she is terrorizing the bird. She's making her poison apple. And she's like, yes, one bite and the blood will congeal and the skin grow cold. And oh, is there an antidote? Then it's like, oh, it's love's first kiss.
Right. Did you
She's
guys read the actual encryption that it said in there? Because it literally did not say death. It said like sleeping
sleeping death.
death.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
then it had dot, dot, dot. And I was like, maybe the bitch just needed to turn the page and she would have had all the information.
Yeah.
She
Like,
was too close to her glory that she's like, I just gotta go through with it.
right. Like, I'm pretty sure she didn't turn the page when she needed to.
Hmm.
Yeah, and the idea too that she's like a love's first kiss, hot, like doesn't mean anything to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's like, well, she'll be buried alive because they'll think she's dead. And so yeah,
Yeah.
she goes off cackling to herself, desecrating some corpses. And the
It's regular Tuesday night.
vultures are
Yeah.
just like either she's gonna kill somebody or she's gonna
She
die
gonna
on
be
the way.
killed.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
free
Either
snack.
way, I know what I'm doing tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but meanwhile, Snow White is the dwarves are like, tell us a bedtime story, tell us a love story. Like they're like, do you
Oh.
have any hot goss? And she's like,
What's the tea?
well,
Yeah.
and she's like, there's a princess, and they're like, was it you? And she's like, she doesn't
I'll
say,
never tell.
but
I'll
she
never
sings,
tell.
someday my prince will come.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people often think of this as a more traditional I Want song like she
I
sings it at
like
the
it.
beginning of
Yeah.
the movie. But
Yeah.
I think it's important that it comes later. And that when she says my prince, she's referring to a specific individual, not the
And not
concept that
just
she has a
Prince. Yeah.
prince. And
Hmm.
I
Though he still
think
doesn't have a name.
yeah, he doesn't have a name. But I think
Isn't
we
the first one
The
to get a name the Prince Philip, right?
yeah,
Because like Charming doesn't have a name either.
he's just
His
the
name's
prince,
Charming.
yeah.
Yeah.
So people like assume that it's about this kind of idea that "Oh, I'm waiting for my prince, my perfect someone. And there are lyrics that
Sure.
they use in the pop covers that reflect that. But the reality is that she's like, no, I'm waiting for this specific guy.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
and it's less about waiting for him, and it seems to be more like it's a Great Depression era song. So the vibe
Right.
is giving like, hey, like things are kind of shit right now, but someday things are gonna be better. Like spring
Right.
will be here, things will be better. We're gonna go off and be happy. We're gonna get married.
Right.
Like there's better days ahead. And
Right.
that's to me like why I really like the original lyrics. I think they're really they paint a very pretty picture that's very in the tone of the movie. And
Right.
it's it's like when you're in the context of the Great Depression, you're like there's so much like melancholy hope to it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
I think when it becomes like a pop song about like everybody has a prince, I'm waiting for my prince, it's like it doesn't hit the same for me.
Right.
Um, and she's so they're like bedtime, they're like you can have our beds, we'll be fine down here. And she's like, are you sure? They're like, yeah.
Right.
And they fight over the pillow. There's shenanigans with Dopey and his little feather that goes like, and someone sleeps on Dopey's butt as a pillow.
Yep.
And yeah.
I
Uh,
really love the whole feather sequence. Like me personally, that just tickled my little heart. Like
the noise it
it's
makes too.
yeah, like it's the same as like what you were talking about with like the fly in the bubble. Like I just found it so charming and so amusing. Like that I just wanted to sit. I could have watched another 20 minutes of them fighting over who got the tiny little feather.
And in earlier drafts, the whole thing was gags, and eventually they're like, wait, we need to like cut back the gags and then like
Right,
have them timed at the right place.
right.
So while the queen is godless, Snow White is praying. Um,
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Like is that I don't feel like that's something we see in other Disney films. I
the
feel
only
like
other
this is it.
Disney heroine to pray is Esmeralda.
Mm.
Oh
And
yeah, she
that
has like a
makes
whole
sense in
song
the
about it.
context.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But she says, like God bless the seven dwarves, and may
Make
all
Grumpy
my
like me.
may Grumpy like me. She like almost forgets. It reminds me of Sound of Music. Oh, and God bless Kurt. Like she goes to get up, and then she's like, oh wait, yeah, like please make Grumpy like me.
Oh, I love that.
And then she's like, may all my dreams come true. And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
dream big, manifest. Always ask for more. Um, and so she is I just was going through my notes. I said the real evil is being an incel. I think I'm referring to the queen. Um,
Sorry, that was really loud, but you tickled me. Uh
the next morning, the dwarves are leaving, and Grumpy, I guess God works quickly. Like that wishing well worked quickly. God works quickly. Grumpy is like,
Yep, Grumpy's like, "All right, listen.
be
Don't
safe,
let nobody in the house.
smart.
Don't let nobody in the house. Don't let nobody in the house. Oh, and before I forget, don't let nobody in the house."
Yeah, he's being like, just watch yourself. And she's like, oh, Grumpy, you do care. And she kisses him, and he gets all Twitter pated, and he's mad because he didn't want anyone to think he cares. And
Right?
Dopey just keeps wanting a kiss.
Dopey
Um,
is my favorite. I love him.
yeah,
He just keeps running back inside and she like doesn't notice it at first and then she's like, okay, last one."
yeah. Um, and so they're gone. She's making pies with the birds. I love the pie, how she does with the crust and the
With the little
name.
feet.
Yeah.
Oh, so cute. I know it's not like hygienic, but it's so cute. I also low key, we were sitting watching this and Quentin was like, "How bad do you want a pie right now?" And I was like, "So
Right.
bad.
Yeah.
So bad I want a pie right now."
I want a pie, yeah. And the queen shows up. Snow White is scared, and she's like, "Oh, you making pies?" And she's like, "Yeah, gooseberry." And he's like, "Well, real men want apple pies." It makes the
Hmm.
folks' mouths water. And she's like, "Here's the apple." And the birds and the squirrels are like, "This lady's vibes are fucked." Like
Yeah.
they're like, "We hate her." And so the birds attack her, and she's like, "Ugh, shame, like don't attack a defenseless poor old woman."
Right.
And so the animals are like, "Hey, plan B, we got to get the dwarves." And I loved this part as a kid. I mean, I loved it now, but with the how frantic the animals are, and they rally the dwarves. Sleepy puts it together before Doc. He's like, "Oh, maybe the evil queen."
I love his delivery though. Maybe the evil queen got her.
Uh,
Oh.
and so they panic and they're rushing to go save her.
Right.
And the queen is like, "Oh, thank you for getting the water for me. Thank you for being so kind to poor old Granny. Here's a magic wishing apple. Like you should take a bite." And
Yeah.
in her defense, I always thought this was really dumb, but in her defense, a well worked for her. So why not an apple? Like she's in a universe with wishing wells. Why not wishing apples? But she's like, yeah, there's got to be something you want, like maybe a boy. And I think it's very interesting that all the pressure for like pleasing men and like wanting a boy is coming from the evil queen.
Right.
And Snow White is like, she's doing the thing where it's like she's terrified, but she's people pleasing and like trying
Yeah.
not to be rude. And she's like, okay, I'll make a wish. And she takes this bite, and the queen is like, oh, her blood congeal, and she passes out. And she said, I'll be the fairest in the land. And it's like, not right now. You look busted. And the dwarves and animals show up, and they're chasing
Right.
her. They don't care that she's an old lady. They're chasing after her with weapons, and she's like, I'll crush their bones. And God intervenes, I guess, and smites her down with a thunderbolt for being
As he should,
godless. Yeah.
because she's godless, as we've
Exactly.
established.
Yeah. And the vultures go to eat
Yep.
her. So
They were
she's, yeah.
waiting. Mother Nature's garbage disposal.
hmm So this is a pretty intense scene. Great stakes. And the dwarves are mourning her,
Yeah.
weeping, even grumpy, and they put her in a glass coffin, and she sleeps for a while, and they're all mourning
Hmm.
her, the animals, everybody. And the prince shows up looking for her. He hears about the coffin. He's like, "Oh," and he gives her a farewell kiss. I think that's important in discourse
This is the
about,
part where people get,
yeah.
um, yeah.
And I get if the context was this was like a act of sexual gratification.
Okay.
I think if the content, but the context is that they were people who were kind of in a relationship, and he's giving
Right.
like
A farewell.
a farewell peck,
Yeah.
no tongue, but not in a weird Edward Cullen no tongue way.
Right. I mean, it's one of those things like if I was like asleep and Quentin had to leave for work early and he like kissed my forehead or something, like I wouldn't think twice about it, but I'm in an established relationship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's not like she's
it's
passed out drunk at a party and
right.
asleep. It's
Yeah.
like,
This is the end as far as they know.
And the
yeah,
So
other thing is that it's a wishing apple, quote unquote, and her wish was probably
could have
for the
been for the kiss of a
prince.
king, yeah, or the kiss of a prince, yeah.
yeah. Well, she
Yes.
says
So
Or
like
she
she's,
wants the prince, right?
yeah,
She was
yeah,
just singing about him. So it's just like
so
there's a
obviously.
lot of other elements. Like
Nobody
I
would waste time singing about something they don't want.
yeah,
yeah, I think like it's like the on the face reading of like, oh, this is creepy, not consent. But it's like there are other things in the story that are pointing to that like it's not exactly that.
yeah,
Well,
It's
it's also like this seems very surface level, but there are actually a lot of moving parts, and most of them are off
yeah,
screen. So, it's like what Colin was talking about earlier. Like a lot of their story doesn't add up if we take it at face value. It's
yep.
most likely that, I mean, there is like a headcanon now for me that they were pen pals, and so I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
yeah,
Because they're pen pals, and because you're right, like at the very beginning song, it's not like, "Hi, I'm the prince. Hello, I'm Snow White." Like they're singing to each other as if they were anticipating this meeting and this conversation. And so I think that in the context of like saying farewell to a loved one, I could see that.
Yeah.
yeah. And again,
Yeah.
it's not an act of romantic or sexual gratification. Like he
Yeah.
Right.
bows his head after. It's,
Yeah,
it's like,
it's a farewell.
yeah.
It's a
And when
sign of respect.
so to say,
Yeah.
oh, he kisses a corpse is also a little bit like it's not like he's digging
Well,
somebody
also,
up.
I don't want to be like vulgar, but that's also what you do at a funeral. Like my stepmother kissed my
Yeah.
father's cheek at his funeral. Like what's the
Yeah.
difference, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing. I don't even
Yeah.
think that's like that's what they're
Right. Like
implying,
there's nothing like necrophilia about that. You're saying goodbye to a loved one in a way that is obviously very traumatic. And I think that how you deal with that loss and that grief is very personal, but also it's okay if it's,
Yeah.
not necessarily what we anticipate. And again, not to harp on this, but it was 1937. I don't know the cultural
Yeah.
expectation in a scenario like this in 1937.
And I think
My
it
grandparents met on their wedding day, all right? So
yeah.
sometimes we have different opinions based on like just what our personal views are versus like what we expect out of other people. Like we nowadays might see arranged marriages as like a strange lens, but like my grandparents, that's just what was anticipated. So the first
Yeah.
time they met was right before the first time they kissed.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
I don't know. I
people,
think
yeah,
it's a
marriage is a
lens.
great example of an institution that
Yeah.
that's meaning has changed across time and culture.
Oh,
Hmm.
yes. Because the concept of marrying for love is very new, and I
Very
don't think
new.
people realize how new it is.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think if we talk about this movie in the context, I think kissing someone farewell was more normal to them than someone seeing a corpse and wanting to take it home. Right? Like
Yeah,
that's an
or at least
Yeah.
adaptational
openly.
choice from
That's
the
a
Yeah,
good
Brothers
point,
Grimm
Cullen.
that it's like, oh, how do we take this thing that would not read to modern audiences and simplify it and make it make
right,
emotional sense to a
Yeah.
modern audience? And people
right,
were familiar with like the Tchaikovsky Sleeping Beauty ballet and like those kind of
right.
elements. And so they're like, let's just pull this.
Or
Um,
Romeo and Juliet to toss it back even
yeah.
further, you know?
And
And even to like think about it like also we have to keep in mind that this is 2025. So people can go on Reddit and Tumblr and Pinterest and Snapchat and
yeah.
Instagram and X and Twitter and have all kinds of conversations with strangers where they pick apart every tiny little thing in the world. But in 1937, there were like 20 writers in a room and they were all like, and then the prince shows up and he says bye, and that's it. And they were like, well, he can't just say bye. Like, we need a romantic climactic moment. And then somebody else was like, well, he could kiss her. Well, that's not okay. Well, what if he just like kisses her on the cheek? Like, this was a whole conversation between like 20 people in 1937 and now millions of people in 2025.
Yeah. And maybe
Yeah.
dissecting Disney movies, even though as we do it now, but like in that kind of bad faith way, like when people like, and then that's where their feminism ends. You
Right,
know,
right,
that's I think also sometimes my
Yeah.
issue with that is it's like, well,
right,
are we going to talk about like equity in the workplace, equity in paid
right.
time off, you know, like,
Equity in the home.
yeah. So,
Right? Like we're talking a lot, not like to get us slightly off topic, but like there's a lot of talk right now in equity in the military because women get maternity leave, but men don't get paternity leave.
yeah.
hmm
And that's
And that's
common in a
common
lot
in a
of
lot of
industries.
places.
Yeah.
It is, but the military is trying to like fix stuff like that a little
Yeah.
bit. So just like we're still talking about some of these issues in 2025 and that, you know, we've come a long way, but not everything has been resolved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we see I always say this is one of my favorite Disney movies and movie ending scenes. I love this scene. I always said it's a Jesus said I had the most iconic resurrection and Snow White said hold my beer because I think this is a pretty iconic resurrection.
Hold my
She's
tea. Snow
hold
White said,
my
hold my
yeah,
tea.
hold my gooseberry cider. And the because she like everyone's sad and then he sees her like kind of get up and slowly stretch. She does like a dramatic stretch and all the animals and dwarfs slowly are like wait wait and they're all waking up and then she's like throws her arms open, he scoops her up and then everyone is like blissed out, like the music's blissed out, they're
Yeah.
like dancing frolicking like no one has ever
Yay!
frolicked, they're so happy and it's like this emotional scene, like they were literally so sad.
Very emotional, yeah.
And this is actually what Tolkien calls, to bring him back, the eucatastrophe in a fairy tale, that moment where everything switches from sadness to light, you know? And she
And that's
said,
why we watch TV and read books, Tolkien.
yeah,
Yes, we want to be challenged. Yes, we want to broaden our horizons. But sometimes, and this is coming from a millennial, I know I have a nostalgic life. I don't care. Sometimes we just want to be happy, and that's
yeah,
okay. It's
yeah.
okay if we just want a happy ending.
Because it's like, oh, Snow White went through these horrible things and she came out the other end
Right. Look how
happy.
happy that girl is.
Yeah. She says goodbye to the dwarves and the animals, and they scoop off to the castle in the clouds, and we get the big finale. Someday my prince will come.
Right.
Um, that's the movie. I mean, we could, you know, do we root for our protagonist? I mean, yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we always say that, Cinderella is having courage and be kinding it, but I'm feeling like this Snow White is also having courage and
be
being
Being
kind.
kinding it.
kinding
She
it.
really
So,
is. Yeah, having
I
courage
would
to be
also
kind.
say that like Snow White, because I think that they try to, if in the new 2025, they try to give her a similar phrase, like
Yeah,
yeah, but I can't remember
a
what it is. But
mantra.
yeah, mantra. But I also think that when it comes to Snow White, she has a lot on her shoulders. She
Yeah,
is the OG. She is the original. She is the
the
first.
blueprint. Yeah.
And so it's really easy to rip apart the first of anything.
Hmm. Spoken like a
Very
writer.
easy, huh?
Spoken like a writer. The first
Well,
thing you
I mean,
write,
it
the
is
first
though. Like
draft, it's
it's
so easy to, yeah.
Oh my goodness. The first draft, my friend Natalie calls it a crime against literature, and she's 100% right. Like my first draft was nowhere near the concept of the story I actually published, right?
Yeah.
So, and my publisher probably wouldn't have published the first one. But it's really easy to pick apart the first, but what we have to think of it is like what Colin said, it's a blueprint, and we expand and we grow and we improve. And we start with Snow White, who's
Hmm.
kind and grateful and patient and kind of simple,
Resilient. Yeah.
very resilient. And we move up to Moana, who's resilient and kind and graceful and patient and really just wants to take care of her family. And so we do have a huge growth in our princesses and our princes and our representation in Disney films and TV series. But we also keep at our core someone who's kind.
Yeah.
And that's really what it boils down to is that's who Snow White is. You can pick apart every other piece of this film, but you can't take that away from her. You can't say that she's not kind.
Yeah.
And so every time someone picks it apart, and especially if you're the one listening, just try to keep in mind that they probably were worried more about completely different topics than what we would discover in 2025. Disney has come a long way. And in 20 years, I'm sure that someone in the future will rip apart Moana and all of us will start grabbing our pitchforks.
Yeah.
I will.
You're
I'll
like,
I'll
Pitchfork
sharpen
is
it right
ready.
now just to be ready. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great way to sum it up. I think as a protagonist, right, she doesn't have a traditional arc the way like Moana does or we expect now, but she is kind. She changes the world around her. She makes it a
yeah,
brighter place, and the story proves that her focused on herself and others and bringing happiness and joy is the way to go compared to the
yeah,
scary antagonist who's so competitive and obsessed with putting
Mhm.
other people down. And it's like the story is saying like be kind, fill your world with sunshine, which is what Snow
yeah.
White does, and she's proven right. And I do, that's the circumstances of her story. I've always been a truther that I think you could swap Frodo and Snow White. Back to Tolkien, Lord of the Rings come up a lot. In Lord of the Rings, I think Snow White could do it. She might even do it
Yeah.
faster than Frodo. She wouldn't be corrupted. It'd take a
No,
lot to
because
corrupt her.
she would ask help from the creatures of the
The
forest.
animal.
Yeah,
She
Yeah.
wouldn't wait until the third book to be like, that eagle can fly. Maybe I could hitch a ride.
yeah,
That would be like first book. She'd be like,
yeah.
didn't I
Yeah.
help you find your mom? I feel like you owe me one.
Yeah, she's got all the birds on her side. She does not care about power. She's
Yeah.
like, sorry, is this ring gonna help me bake a pie? No, like
Is this
let's
gonna
get
give
rid
me
of it.
my prince? Because he's gonna give me my own ring. I don't really need this one.
Yeah, like how many
Yeah.
squirrels will die if this isn't destroyed? A lot. This is done. This
Yeah.
ring is donezo.
Right.
All
Right.
Yeah,
she has to do is she just chucks it as hard as she can and it just goes in. Like,
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
it.
And
yeah.
She
she's
doesn't have
got
to go on the whole journey. She's just
She
that strong.
she helps Gollum too. Like I feel like she helps
Yeah,
Gollum.
absolutely.
She gives him a
she's
kiss on
like, I
his
have
ugly
a
bald
sweater.
head.
Let me
Yeah.
comb your hair. Like, yeah,
Yeah, she knits him a sweater for sure.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and we usually ask if we ship our main couple. Are they like the most iconic Disney couple? No, he's more of a plot device. But there's
His
a
name is
cuteness.
the. Okay.
His name is but
I mean,
Snow White loves though. And she loves him a
yeah.
lot, and I feel that she loves him, and that's what I
Yeah.
need.
I feel like it's one of those things like that's actually not the main focus of this
No.
film.
Mm-mm.
Like I said, the dude's only in two scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
The focus is more like the chosen family that
yeah,
yeah.
this is like
develops.
the OG found family.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
found
That's my
family.
takeaway.
Yeah.
It's true beauty is
Yeah,
inside. It's you're the one who can fill the world with sunshine. I would say like if you're looking for the true love conquers all Disney movie, that would be like a Sleeping Beauty.
right,
This
right,
is much more like found family, like positivity. Um,
right.
and the person who doesn't have any of that is our spooky antagonist.
I
Yeah.
honestly I feel like it's one of those things that the and Snow probably aren't shipped very much just
Right.
because they have so little screen time to capitalize on. Whereas, some of to bring it back to modern again, Tangled and
Yeah,
Flynn and Rapunzel have all the screen time,
Yeah.
yeah, and
right?
that's
And if you go back to Cinderella again, he's in like a couple of scenes and they get married.
Yeah.
And the prince was kind of irrelevant. And I love that saying where it's like Cinderella never asked for a prince, she asked for a pretty dress and a night off.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of Snow White. Like she's dreaming of her prince and her true love, but that wasn't her like her character motivation in this film.
Yeah, she's trying to survive and find joy in her life, and she's like, the
Right.
prince would be nice.
Right.
And yeah, I think it's time for a big question.
Okay.
Was that your fantasy? The two-pronged question of did you like this movie and is this an adventure you'd want to live out? Let's start with
No.
Hannah. All right, let's start with Bethany.
Sorry.
Okay,
Sorry. I was just
no.
like, no.
No, you don't want to live out this story?
I do not want to worry about dying. I do not want to be fearful. First of all, I'm a teacher and I eat an apple every day for lunch. That is not an exaggeration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My kids are always bringing me apples and I like free food. I have an apple every day for
Okay, but
lunch.
I love that kids still do that.
Oh my
Yeah.
That
goodness. My
it
kids
seems
bring me
like
all
such a
kinds of random
classic
stuff.
thing, like
Yeah,
the
my
apple
kids
for a
give me all
teacher.
kinds of randoms. I have like 50 friendship bracelets. Um,
I love
but no,
that.
for me personally, like this is a very sweet story. I do like the concept of found family. Do I want to be Snow White? No.
No. So
No.
it's your fantasy in that you like the movie, but not in that you want to experience it.
Right. Like her day-to-day life right now doesn't seem very enviable. Maybe when she gets to the castle, I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind doing nothing but cooking and cleaning all day, but I do feel like I would get bored and I would need a hobby.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked this movie a lot.
Yeah, because
Um,
I always love seeing your take on some of the classics that you haven't seen in a while.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I didn't have anything to complain about. Like this was just like a really pleasant story. Um, and yeah, I think what drew me to it was more of the relationship she built with the dwarves, like her found
Hmm.
family. Um, I would like to live in like that little part of the story. I wouldn't want a stepmother, an evil stepmother, a godless stepmother nonetheless, to
Hannah's
be
cottage
coming
core.
after. Yeah, literally cottagecore. Um, yeah, like, you know, being able to conquer evil just by existing, sure, that would be great. I would love that, especially in
Right.
our times. Um, but yeah, no, wouldn't want to live this out. I wouldn't want to be Snow White playing scared in the woods. No. But I
Yeah.
did really enjoy this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I love this movie. I think it really shaped me. I think visually also it's just so strong. Something about the visuals are just so like they imprint on your mind. Um, Especially the animals, so cute. And I think I would say yes because I love a little adventure. It is scary, but cool animal friends, adorable little animals that just want to be pet and cuddled, like a cottagecore life. And I think if me finding happiness and love overthrows an evil regime, like if it leads to Mitch McConnell being gone and Trump and all stuff, and then like I end up live, laugh, loving, and they're gone because they're destroyed by their own hate and God himself. That sounds like a great fantasy for me and everyone. And that's, I guess, the egg that we will offer ourselves in this trying time is that, we're the ones who can fill our world with sunshine. And whether that's your day-to-day positivity or speaking up like Snow White does, she roasts Grumpy for being misogynist.
Yep.
And I think speaking out and stating your mind and saying that you're not okay with the bad things that are happening is also a
Hmm.
way to fill the world with sunshine. Um, and we'll kind of see that, I think, in some of our other Snow White adaptations. I haven't seen all the
Yeah.
ones we're covering this month, but
I'm excited
um,
though. If you do
yeah.
winter, you know who to call.
Yeah, yeah, we start doing books. Uh, yeah, so speaking of winter and the Lunar Chronicles, Bethany, do you want to like plug your media empire, I guess?
Yeah, literally media empire.
Uh, where do I start? Okay. Um, Podcast. I am a one of the founders of the Three Sisters Network. We have four podcasts. I'm the host of all of them. Um, I have Bite Me, which is a vampire literacy podcast that I do with my best friend Ash. I have Suit Up, which is a How I Met Your Mother podcast that I do with my sisters, Lindsay and Samantha, who run the Three Sisters Podcast Network with me. I have a Tangled podcast called Tangled Up, which I host with Dari, who people might know from Of Slippers and Spindles. And then what I am probably most known for is I have a Lunar Chronicles podcast called the Prince Kai Fan Pod, which is supported by Marissa, which is the main author, which is amazing. And we're about to celebrate 6 years as the Prince Kai Fan Pod.
That's iconic.
Congrats.
6 years
Amazing.
in May.
I love the
Yeah.
name of Prince Kai Fan Pod.
Oh, thank you.
It gives like when you're like making like your first email, like a Tumblr, like it just
Yeah.
gives that energy and that nostalgia, which is like the feeling of the pod to me. Like there's kind of like we're all having fun, like pretension isn't
Yeah.
invited. We're having a good
I think
time.
we had a list of like 20 titles that we were coming up with, and they all just felt kind of, I don't know, like forced, or like one of
Yeah.
them was like Rampion Crew, and it's like, well, that's really on the nose. And then one of them was like Artemisia Land or something, and I was like, that feels like it has nothing to do with the series. And then um we were trying to figure out like a play on words, and Prince Kai Fan Club is like a really common joke in the first three books, especially. So we were like, well, what if we were the Prince Kai Fan Pod instead of Club? So yeah, that's kind of where that came from. And when we're done with the Lunar Chronicles, we're going to start covering every other book Marissa has ever written. So it's about to become very unapplicable, but we're at 6 years. Like
Yeah.
Prince Kai Fan Pod is mentioned in Gilded by Marissa Meyer. I'm not changing it now.
You can't after you get an author shout out.
Yeah,
I can't do
seriously.
that.
Speaking of
Um,
authors,
You are one.
I am one, yeah. My Jaybird trilogy, More Than Life, came out last year. Cullen was the first one to interview me about that.
that I
My
love that
iconic
book.
Costco scene. And it's a 18th century retelling of Atlantis. And my spin-off, More Than Dreams and More Than Destiny, comes out later this year in 2025, which follows two characters that are very briefly introduced in book three called Russell and Marie. Uh, and I have plans for more books in the future, but 5 books in 2 years is a lot, so we'll
Yeah.
start there.
Yeah,
Yeah, seriously.
They're all
impressive.
available on Kindle Unlimited if anybody wants to read them for free,
Ooh.
or feel free to check out your local library and request it there, as Hannah said earlier, because it's always nice to have a free copy.
And check out our episode talking about the first book of the series, More
Yes.
Than Life.
I'll come back if you ever want to talk about the other two.
Ooh, exclusive author interview. And you can also, I don't think we mentioned it, but Bethany was on our Cinderella episode. So if you love
Yes.
talking about classic Disney movies,
Mhm.
and
I feel
our
like you guys were on an episode of Prince Kai Fan Pod too, right? No?
Mm-mm.
Okay,
Not
that's
yet.
in the future.
Not yet.
I read
Yeah.
Really?
Heartless just so you when you
Heartless
needed
starts
it.
in June.
Let me know.
Okay, you call me and tell me what chapters you want.
Okay, I have to remember what chapters in which or what scenes I like. God, we're almost done. Give me some light. All right. I'm trying to fill my world with sunshine.
But you can find Prince Kai Fan Pod everywhere at Prince Kai Fan Pod, and I'm everywhere, Bethany Finger author, BethanyFingerAuthor.com and Instagram, and just everywhere books are sold. And when does this episode come out?
In like 2 weeks, I think.
Okay, so if
Yeah.
you're in the Colorado Springs area, I got invited to do a signing at the Barnes and Noble there. So that'll be on March 19th. So if you're in that area and you want a
Perfect.
signed copy with a bunch of really cool merch that I'm going to be bringing, and then also this summer I'm going on a book tour. So if you pay attention to my Instagram, you'll see what locations I'm going to be going to, because that has not been clarified yet. We haven't confirmed all the locations yet. Putting a book tour together is more complicated than I would have thought.
Yeah.
But
Well,
that's
you
exciting.
gotta check out everything Bethany has ever done and is going to continue to do with her media empire. So check her out and definitely be checking out her book series, and the new ones that are coming out this year. Very
Yeah.
exciting. But yeah, you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We are at Not My Fantasy Pod. If you are listening on iTunes or Spotify, you can give us that 5-star review. Let everyone know in your little comment what you love about the podcast. If it's having Bethany on at least once a year, let us know. And then if you are watching on YouTube, hi, hello, you can
Smash that like button.
smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the notification bell so you get notified anytime we drop a new video episode.
The birds will sing and the notifications will ring.
Wow,
Yeah.
beautiful.
And comment
Joyful song.
below with like which dwarf you feel most connected to. It's okay
Yeah.
if it's
Ooh,
sneezy. Yeah.
Yeah, if it's
love
sneezy,
that.
if you're dealing with allergies, listen, I feel you, I see you, I am you right now.
I
Yeah.
feel like just as an adult, it's sleepy. Like
So real.
just like as an adult, like being a
Yeah,
grown up most of the time, I'm just like, oh, I'm sleepy.
I had 2 coffees and a Celsius today.
my
Um,
goodness.
yeah,
No,
that's
I'm
not
going to bed as
normal,
soon as
but
we're done with this. I'm like brushing my teeth, washing my face, hitting the
Same.
pillow.
yeah. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Cullen Ever After, and on Blue Sky at Cullen C,
Which
and
stands for Cullen Cullen because
Cullen
he's
Cullen.
married
Yes,
to
as an Emmett.
Emmett Cullen.
Yeah, the only one I could tolerate.
Yes.
And then you can
I'm loving this.
tune in next time. I don't know which order they'll come out yet, but we're doing two live action Snow White films
Huh?
from the 2010s.
Uh-huh.
Snow
Yes.
White and the Huntsman, another K-Stew classic, and
Uh-huh.
Mirror Mirror, starring Emily in Paris
Okay, that one
herself.
I like.
So,
I know I've seen the K Stew one to
I
like hate
haven't.
watch it and then but I've never seen Mirror Mirror.
Yeah.
Mirror Mirror was great, uh, because it's exactly what it looks like it's going to be in the trailer. But I did not, don't bring me back for the Huntsman. I probably wouldn't have a lot of good stuff to say. I did not enjoy it.
All right, spoilers. We'll see.
Perfect.
It's my first time, my first watch.
You might change my
Yeah.
opinion with your positivity.
I'll
I'll
fill
listen
you
to
in
that
with the
episode
sunshine.
and
Yeah.
I'll let you know.
All right.
He'll probably be making fun of it.
You're
From what
like,
I remember.
I'll get a text of like, I don't want to do this episode either.
if I can survive Twilight, I can survive anything.
Say
Um,
that now. No, just kidding.
yeah. So tune in then for that. In the meantime, take care and keep on going with a smile and a song, everybody. Bye.
Bye.